All right. Good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, December 20th, 2022, and we're convening a regularly scheduled meeting of the Brattleboro Select Board. Patrick, was this meeting properly warned?
Yes, it was.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I would now look to someone to make a motion on the minutes. Jess.
I move we approve the minutes of December 6th.
Jess has made a motion to approve the minutes of December 6th, 2022. Board members, any discussion?
No.
There isn't any issue with what was in the backup material?
Not the digital backup material.
Okay. I think there was an error in the backup material that came in the printed select board notebooks that just go to us. And so what was actually made available to the public was correct.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right, in that case, board members, all those in favor? Aye. It's going to carry 5-0. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to chair remarks. So I've got two remarks this evening. First is my tradition to talk about the elections. So March 7th, 2023 is going to be town meeting day. Petitions for the Wyndham Southeast School District, Brattleboro town officers, and town meeting members are now all available at the town clerk's office. You need 30 signatures for Wyndham Southeast School District and 30 signatures for Brattleboro town officers, and you need 10 signatures for the town meeting member petitions. Those are all due at the town clerk's office by January 30th, 2023 by 5 p.m. when the office closes. If you have any questions or concerns, you can always reach out to Hillary Francis at the town clerk's office. My second announcement is just a moment of appreciation. This is going to be our last meeting of December, which means it's also going to be the last meeting where interim town manager Patrick Moreland is in the role of interim town manager. Patrick stepped into this role at the beginning of June of this year to help the town through a transition period. I can speak for myself and I won't speak for Daniel, but the two of us in the leadership are incredibly appreciative and grateful for Patrick stepping up and being in that position and being a leader that the town really needed. We're all really excited for John Potter, and I'm very grateful that Patrick is going to be moving back into his role as the assistant town manager, and he'll help John both in the transition into being town manager, but then also he will work with John with all of the good work that the town manager's office does for the town of Brattleboro. So Patrick, thank you again so much for all of your work, and I look forward to continuing working with you.
Here. Yeah.
And with that, I conclude my chair remarks and I give it over to manager's comments.
Okay. So thank you very much for the very kind remarks. It's been a challenging 6 months, but I really have appreciated the time to get to know each and every one of you. And I appreciate the support you've shown me and the rest of the team. And I think we've carried on in spite of the challenges, but thank you so much for all of your assistance and your support. It's been great. There's one other piece of business I'd like to mention, both for the board and for the public. Some folks may have already noticed or have seen the press release. The lights in the High Grove parking lot are out, and that creates a very dark environment in the High Grove parking lot at nighttime. In the last snowstorm a couple of days ago, a vehicle apparently drove into the electrical panel and all but destroyed it. And so we're working with a local electrician to get that repaired. And we're waiting on some parts, and it's all coming together. But in the meantime, the parking lot is dark, so please be careful.
Thank you very much, Patrick. All right, board members, comments or committee reports. Liz.
As it's the last meeting of the year, I'd like to wish everyone a happy holiday, peace on earth, goodwill towards all.
Great. Thank you, Liz. Other board members? Jess?
This past weekend, I got to attend the memorial service for Ray McNeil.
Yeah.
And celebration of that incredible town community cultural center.
And I just was really impressed with all the love in the room. And one of the things that came up was the idea of this third space. You have home, you have work, and it's really important to have a third space where you can find community and find your people. That's outside of family and professional. And I thought that was a beautiful idea, and especially as McNeil's was that place for so many folks. It was an incredible celebration from folks that had known Ray and just been there and raised their kids, hanging out in the pub, and to community groups and musicians who had performed there over the years. It was a really meaningful tribute. And I'm going to share a little ditty.
A little ditty.
This is a part of a song that I heard at McNeil's at a pub sing, and it's stuck with me for a long time, and it's really meaningful to me at this time of the year. It goes like this. I am looking at a witch hazel blooming in the garden. It's bright yellow flowers blooming in winter time. And I tell my heart, be strong like that witch hazel flower. And you will not be troubled by these dark and lonesome times.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jess. So, Tim, are you going to say next?
Well,
No, thank you very much. Yes.
yeah, thank you.
Next time, Tim.
Any other board comments, committee reports?
No, it's okay. Sure. Just it's hard not to say happy holidays, happy solstice, which is today. Kwanzaa, Christmas, Hanukkah is also happening now. I'm really looking forward to even better 2023. Been kind of a rough year in these positions we take, but that's part of the job, and I'm really feeling good about what's to come. So thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Tim. All right. So we're going to move on to agenda item 6, public participation. So this is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on something that isn't on the agenda tonight. I'd ask that if you could come, if you're in the room, come up to the microphone, or if you're on Zoom, when you unmute, if you can just say your name and where you're from for the record, we'd greatly appreciate it. So I'll look to the room first and see if there's anyone who'd like to speak. If I see somebody kind of getting up, come on over.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Elwell.
Hi, Jonathan. Put a face to the name.
Some emails, yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you. And so I watched last week's meeting, and I had some thoughts on it that I wanted to share with you all. And it's quite a bit, so I wrote it down to try to keep it cohesive and to the point. But yes, after the police presented their new pilot program, Jess asked how this initiative fits within the community safety review recommendation around embedding social services or access to resources within the control of the police department, and how for some that can create a coercive or dangerous dynamic. And Chief Hardy replied by saying that this is a pilot program, so we'll see how it works and can change it as needed. And then went on to say, quote, if you questioned a lot of people in the community today that you may have questioned 2 years ago, I think that has to also be something that's considered when we're having that conversation around the community safety review, because I can almost guarantee there are changes because people have come to me and told me that. And for these reasons, she said that she doesn't see this program as a threat to the needs expressed in the community safety review, and that it might even be, quote, a help to it because we can show how it can be handled in that way, meaning how things can be handled within the police department. And this suggestion that because the community safety review process happened 2 years ago, its findings are somehow less valid, is extremely alarming to me. Advocates for change were asked to have faith in the process as the right way to understand what was happening in Brattleboro around community safety. And then over the 2 years since the review process, we've been urged, understandably, not to rush to action and wait for gradual implementation over time as the town had more capacity. And so over that time, we've been persistent, but patient over the last 2 years. And that was especially why it was so alarming to see that now the passage of time is being used as a reason why police programs can actively contradict CSR recommendations, which no longer appear to carry the validity that they once might have done. And the reason given by Chief Hardy and then by Lieutenant Evans was that they also hear from some people in the community that they want police responding to more situations or providing more resources and services. And of course, there will always be some people asking the police to do more. The Community Safety Review never claimed to have unanimous support. I don't think there has ever been or will be a single town policy that truly does. But the only recommendations that were included were those where there was truly significant consensus among those most affected by policing. And to claim that this is invalid now because the police also hear from some people that they want more policing, who of course will only be those people who feel safe reaching out to cops in the first place, is self-serving and dismissive of the entire CSR process. I also want to note that when people request something from the police, this does not mean that the police must be the ones who meet that need. As the police often say themselves, they're asked to do things far outside their purview simply because they're so present in the community. And so when we hear them say this, it doesn't mean there's a need for more policing. It means that our community is full of unmet needs that could be met in so many different ways, but right now are being lumped onto the police. I also want to mention just a couple things from the police's main budget presentation. First, they mentioned the housing crisis, not in the sense that it could lead to increased harm or violence, but mainly that it makes it difficult to get new police officers to move to the area. And this feels like a significant misrepresentation of how it relates to community safety. Because of course, the housing crisis is a safety crisis. The housing crisis is itself structural violence playing out in our community as people are made homeless or housing insecure by a system that values profit over people. And when so much of our community is forced to live in these conditions, it's harder for all of us to meet our needs and likely that more harm is going to happen. The idea that having more police officers will make us safer is also flawed. Someone asked during last week's meeting about the relationship between police budgets, staffing, and crime rates over the last few years. And the conclusion appeared to be that there was no meaningful correlation between how many police are working in Brattleboro and the crime rate at any given time. And finally, when we focus too much on crime rates, we miss an opportunity to understand and address harm in more meaningful ways. Crime rates are treated as an objective representation of danger in a community, but they give us such a narrow window of what safety can look like. Any of us are more likely to die in a car accident than we are to be murdered, or more likely to have our wages stolen by employers than we are to be robbed. But you wouldn't know any of that based on crime rates. The police reported in their slideshow that sexual crimes have increased 26.5% from last year. This number seems alarming, and it is. We live in a very violent society, and Brattleboro is not an exception. Sexual harm and intimate partner violence are huge problems. But the implication is that this number gives us a clear idea of sexual harm in our town, which it doesn't, and that more police officers will reduce it, which they won't. The vast majority of sexual assaults are not reported to the police due to a lack of faith in the system's ability to provide justice and keep survivors safe. And the vast majority of those that are reported to police do not end up with a conviction or incarceration. Of course, this assumes, as our current system does, that catching bad guys and locking them up is what keeps our community safe. But data both nationally and locally shows that incarcerating people actually sucks resources from our communities and leads to further trauma and violence. And obviously, you as the Select Board do not control the state's prisons. But when we invest in and empower policing, we're making decisions that will put more people behind bars. And if prisons and police made us safer, the US would be the safest country on earth, but we know that's not true. So I appreciate you all listening to this. And I'll send you what I've written down as an email with some citations to the data that I referenced. And please feel free to, reply to that with any questions or any other thing.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Going next to Zoom. Oh, the angle of the screen is much worse for me today. It's okay like that too, but Jessica, I'll have to rely on you. You can, if you want to move it some.
Okay.
That's good for me. Yeah.
Is that okay for you guys?
Okay. I don't see any hands.
Check the people in the audience.
Can you guys see the screen up here at that angle? I'm not too worried about the people in the very back because you guys are sitting way back there, but here can the audience members here see the screen? Yes. Okay. Okay. So I don't see any hands on Zoom. Is there anyone else in the room who'd like to speak during public participation? Seeing none. All right. So we're going to move on to agenda item 7A, the consent agenda. Errors and Omissions Assessor's Office. Patrick, want to speak very briefly to that?
Yeah, so there's only the one item on the consent agenda this evening. It's the annual submission of the errors and omissions from the assessor's office. This is required by the assessor's office by the state of Vermont Department of Taxes. And each year, at the end of the calendar year, the assessor's office is required to identify what's called errors and omissions, which I believe is a bit of a misnomer. It's any changes that have occurred to the grand list since it was lodged with the town clerk in April. So if the board is accepting of the consent agenda, we will authorize submission to the Department of Taxes of the errors and omissions report produced by the assessor's office.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Patrick. Board members, anyone want to pull it? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion. Liz.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Liz has made a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, carries 5-0. Thank you very much. All right, I'd entertain another motion. Liz.
I move to adjourn, commence as liquor commissioners. Convene,
There it is.
convene.
There it is.
There it is.
How long have we been doing that?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to convene as liquor commissioners. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carries 5-0. We move on to agenda item 8A, the Theory Wellness Tobacco License potential approval. Is this going to be Hillary or Patrick?
Patrick. So before you this evening is a application for tobacco license from Theory Wellness. They are occupying the old Olympia Sports location up on Putney Road at 729 Putney Road. This will be a retail cannabis facility that is seeking a license from the state of Vermont for their retail cannabis operations and seeking a tobacco license from the town of Brattleboro that will, I understand, enable them to be able to sell things like rolling papers and other items that require a tobacco license in order to sell. The application has been considered by all town departments and we recommend your approval. And I understand someone named Tiva Smith.
I think I see her in the Zoom right now. If we want to give her opportunity to put her camera on and speak.
May I, before she speaks, ask Patrick?
If she's going to present to this, maybe we'll let her present first. Or do you have a question about?
Well, I asked Patrick today to explain a little about the cannabis license is a state endeavor.
Yep.
And not local.
I would like to speak to that, but let's have the business
Okay.
owner first. And then, yeah, I have a couple of thoughts as well.
Hi, I'm Tava.
Tava, welcome.
Thank you. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing good. Thanks.
So this is usually an opportunity for the board can sort of give a business owner to speak a little bit about their business. You've got a public audience and a platform. So if you want to just tell us a little bit about Theory Wellness and we'll see if the board has any questions for you.
Sure. Yeah. My name's Tava Smith and I've worked for Theory Wellness since July of 2017. I started as a manager of a store in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, which is in the Berkshires and western Massachusetts. I now oversee our retail operations in Massachusetts and now Vermont. We're a privately owned cannabis company. We're into like craft cannabis and we believe in social justice. We believe in, quality service, quality product. We have 3 dispensaries in Massachusetts. 2 of them are recreational or adult use and medical. And then we also have 4 recreational or adult use dispensaries in Maine. This will be our first dispensary in Vermont. We opened our first dispensary ever in Bridgewater, Massachusetts in 2017. And so, yeah, we're here today because we hope to be selling tobacco paraphernalia, I think is the technical term, as well as tobacco substitute, which would be the vape cartridges. Yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you much, Teva. Liz, did you want to?
Well, I just think that I had some questions. I thought the public should understand as well that licensing of cannabis is a state activity and the municipality has no role.
So, yeah, and I think it's worth also speaking to a moment on basically the town has an option to kind of create a cannabis review board.
Commissioners,
Okay, cannabis commissioners, is that the term?
local commissioners.
Local commissioners. And so we haven't really taken that up in a public meeting to discuss. This is like one of the first ones that we've really had. I mean, I'm curious if the board's interested in discussing that in the future. I think my understanding, and Patrick, correct me if you're wrong, it's a little bit of a ceremonial sort of role because the approval comes from the state no matter what, even if we have a commission here. And so it would more serve as a role of just kind of a pass through, and the public would have an opportunity to sort of hear that there's somebody going through the process, but the select board and the town municipal government wouldn't actually have any control.
So I'm not going to say you're wrong, and I'm not advocating one way or the other whether the board should take the step to create a local commission or not. My understanding of the law that came into being is that the only justification that the select board could use to deny an application was if the retail establishment hadn't obtained its zoning permit.
Yeah.
And so there's a very limited scope from which the board could make a decision, and
And
the zoning permit is already going to be handled and managed in the planning department.
and it probably wouldn't come before us if the zoning permit hadn't been
Right, and
Yeah.
This is a tobacco license.
Agreed.
For, sort of
Yes.
ancillary products to what they're going to be selling.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, Tim.
I would just recommend that we have that on the agenda at some point so
Okay.
that we can have a discussion that's warned about whether or not we should become local commissioners. I'm personally in favor of
Yeah.
it, but that's neither here nor there right now. I can make my case when we have a warned agenda item.
Okay, so let's just shelve that and we'll put that on an agenda. I think it's a good idea. In that case, other questions on this application? No, I'll look to, yep. Oh, and his phone's going off at the same time.
landline?
Gracious.
Rotary phone.
Dick DeGray, Brattleboro, couple of questions, and one not quite related to this, but does the municipality have the ability to limit the number of cannabis licenses that it doles out in the community, or is that strictly controlled by the state?
My understanding state, but I could be not fully informed.
I don't know that you're wrong. I don't know that you're right.
Okay. But by denying the zoning,
Well,
because that's
yeah.
like the one place where we have.
Right, yeah, because you're, like you said, you're only okaying the tobacco portion of the.
Yeah.
One of the, I went to a hearing, I don't know if it was a hearing or an informational session that the planning department put on last year. And really the crux of it is the zoning designation. So if you have a store, it's zoned retail. So anywhere that the town allows retail, your store is allowed. So there's no ability within this body to say no. And as Patrick pointed out, on that ground, right? Because that's a thing that's handled by the planning department.
Well, obviously a background check is done by the applicant, by the state, I'm guessing.
And yeah, Tim may be able to speak to some of this.
Yeah, I
having
mean,
been on
it's pretty robust, the application process, as far as I've seen. But there isn't much control from the town. So the question becomes, whether or not it would be advantageous to have local cannabis commissioners, I believe there are some reasons why we would want to do that. But it still remains a fact that as far as I understand, there's
Well,
very little local control.
Well, as alcohol commissioners, you have the ability to shut a bar room down if there are numerous violations.
Yeah.
And that is a process that comes at a different time than like granting someone like when
Right.
they're a new business, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But if there's a problem, I mean, there's going to be a state adjudication, but I would like you to look at if the local municipality, if you have a governing body, which you probably should, has any authority to say, okay, you violated this, state's doing this and we're doing this.
Yeah.
Second question, Tim might be able to answer this. I think you're on the committee. What is the revenue kickback to municipalities that sales from the cannabis are coming back to the local municipality, if any?
There is no local share unless that municipality, like Brattleboro, has enacted the 1% local option tax, and then we simply recoup that part of those, 2/3 of 1%, as you're familiar.
So our lovely,
That penny.
the lovely legislature is keeping all the money to themselves.
Correct.
Yep.
I made a pretty big fight, as well as some other legislators fought for it too, but we were not successful in getting the state to assign a percentage, any percentage.
Can you tell me how our three local legislators,
I don't think it got to the point where there was a yes/no vote, to be honest. It was worked out in committee.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dick. Liz.
Are we discussing this license now?
Yes, yes. No, and we brought it up. I think it was on topic and
No, absolutely. I
Yeah.
just, there just doesn't seem to be much there in a tobacco license. Like,
I think it's pretty straightforward.
it's just, who are you and what do you want to do?
That's our understanding as well.
Okay. And what would one do to have why would one be rejected? Like, what would
I'm
a
sorry, once again?
violation consist of?
I don't know. I would have to research that and get back to you.
other questions, board members? Daniel.
I was wondering if Mr. Smith would like to speak to the process of their licensing.
Like for their
Yeah.
cannabis, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that seems to be of interest to the public.
Yeah. And so I guess, fortunately for me, potentially unfortunately, I guess for tonight, I haven't been as involved with the state licensing process, as we've had, some other folks in the company that have been more involved than I have, but I can tell you, I think someone had mentioned it's a pretty robust process. Just from the bits and pieces that I've got, it is certainly a robust process from what I can gather. My main role has a lot to do with hiring the team, training the team, helping procure the product, and making sure that we're following the regs to a T, once we're up and operational. And so I probably would not do justice as far as speaking about the application process to a great degree, but I can certainly have someone from the company, come to speak to that if you'd like.
I think we'll probably be able to get a lot of the answers that we need for that discussion from the town attorney. But I appreciate the offer. Do you have any other questions about the application?
No, I think that the tobacco license is pretty straightforward, and I expect us to move on and approve that
Yes.
momentarily. I guess I would say there's one other retail cannabis establishment in town right now that I've been to, and if anyone hasn't been there, just want you to know that there's a lot of stuff you got to get through in order to even get in the door, right? So these are like well-regulated, mature, sensible, professional operations that, as far as what I've seen, are being run in a responsible manner.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions, board? And I don't see anybody else from the public. So in that case, I'd look for a motion. Daniel.
I move to approve a tobacco license for Theory Wellness located at 728 Putney Road.
Daniel has made a motion to approve a tobacco license for Theory Wellness located at 728 Putney Road. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carries 5-0. Tiva, thank you very much and congrats.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you so much. And one quick note, it's actually 768.
Ooh.
Sorry.
So I'm gonna modify that now and we'll make the motion again. So modified motion to approve a tobacco license for Theory Wellness located at 768.
Yes.
768 Putney Road. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's gonna carry 5-0 again. All right. Congrats a second time.
Yeah, thanks so much. And
Thank you.
yeah, it's great being I was actually born in Middlebury, Vermont, and I love
Oh.
Vermont. So it's great to be up in
Welcome
Vermont.
back.
Thank you.
Welcome
Great.
back.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I look for a motion. Jess.
I move that we adjourn as liquor commissioners.
Jess has moved that we adjourn as liquor commissioners. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carries 5-0. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item 9A, new business financial reports by Finance Director Kim Frost. Come on down. I believe our first is going to be the audit and financial statements for FY22.
Is correct.
Patrick, do you have a preamble or are we just going right to Kim?
Hi, Kim.
There it is.
Preamble. Okay, so good evening. So tonight I present you with the audited financial statements for fiscal year 2022 and the single audit for fiscal year 2022. There are copies in the room, it's on the website, and I know it's in your packets. The auditors conducted an in-depth review of our financial statements. They conduct this audit looking for material deficiencies. They test our internal control process, and they review our compliance with federal grant compliance. I'm happy to report that our auditors have stated our financial statements present fairly in all material aspects. There were no findings to this report. This is great news. The board and the public can have confidence in our financial statements and our internal controls. At this time, I would like to commend my staff. They've worked hard all year. They're diligent. They contribute a lot to make that audit successful all year. So the audit is a point in time, but the staff is working hard all year and making sure that we're complying in every aspect. So when the audit happens, it becomes a very smooth process. And like I said, the reports are shared on the website, and after anybody reviews them, if they have any questions, they can reach out to me, my email, I'm in my office every day. So
Great.
those are the two audited reports.
Kim, what's your email?
Oh, kfrost@brattleboro.org.
All right, board. Questions, comments on Kim's presentation on the audit? Jess.
I just want to say congratulations. It's
Mm.
always great to have an audit that has no findings at CAMS that is so positive about the practices of the finance department. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Liz.
I also congratulate you. I understand that internal controls are very important for our town's well-being. And in this case, no news is good news. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Kim, was this the first audit since you've been finance
This
director?
is, yes.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
And any, even though cleans, we're good on the
Mhm.
audit, is there anything that you've learned from this audit that can be implemented for next year? any kind of additional controls or anything like that?
There are, but it would be like more longer term solutions. You know, one of the things is our accounting software that we utilize is very antiquated.
Yeah.
Like very antiquated, and that would be, you know, in the long term, that's something that we should look at, because that helps in the internal control process, because when we're updated in the software process, there are internal controls that are built in there that then, you know, you can concentrate on other things. That would probably be the most important thing. I think our internal controls over who does what, and how transactions are conducted, and who has the ability to enter something, approve something, or stamp something. There's all that separation of duties. All of that is in really actually great shape. And that was here before I came. So that's been really, and the staff is really diligent at making sure that they comply with those systems that are in place.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Excellent.
Yes.
All right. Any other questions, comments from the board before we? Public? Okay, I see, I'm gonna go with the Zoom first this time. See Ricky's got their hand up.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. So I'm looking at the auditor's report, and on the memorandum of it, because there's several of the 2003 budget message on page 8. There is the other expenses described, which says that there is an expected decrease, and just between like me and the constituents that have spoken to me, we both would like more of the other expenses in the general fund to be itemized, rather than I think it's anticipated to be still, it looks like still over $1 million of expenses in the general fund that are being spent, and they would like that to be more itemized.
All right, thank you, Ricky.
I think that like the finance director is responsible for that, because like, for example, I was told that the finance director is responsible for in the capital fund of the Parks and Rec, that for them to itemize their waste management for dog stations as an ongoing cost, that they would need permission to do that. And then so I'm hoping we can confirm that they have permission to do that in the future, so that we have more transparency about how much money is being spent, because about $500 was spent on that for the first time this year, and that was for about 5 stations. So we're hoping to at least double that budget for next year, because there's a lot more areas to cover and get more stations for.
Daniel's just got a quick question, Ricky.
Ricky, you referred to page 8. It's hard for me to do this without, on page 8, I'm looking at 2 graphs. Is that the same page that you're referring to?
No, because I'm looking at it online, and when I go to the finance director page and I see on the right side, the FY23 budget, there's an introductory budget message, and I open that and I go, so like, there's no graph, it's just like a little verbal description of the overall. If you want me to read it out, I can.
No, I think that's all right. So you're talking about the budget, the auditor's budget?
No, just the regular the FY23 budget.
So we're, Ricky, this item on the agenda, we're talking about the audits, which are, I'm assuming in the backup material, they have, you know, financial statements as of June 30th, 2022, an independent auditor's report is the backup material. That's what we're discussing right now.
Well, like the audit, like it wasn't sent to the representatives, the file, like what Jessica sent out to the people on the subscription list, email list from her. It just says that it's available on the website. So when I go to the website, that's what I see. I don't see the audit report.
I think he might be speaking about the budget itself.
They are.
Right?
24 budget.
And what we're considering right now is the audit, which is like the review of the previous financial condition of the town in FY22.
Yeah.
If I wasn't bringing up this topic when she is speaking about what she is responsible of and what authority she has over my concern, when would I speak about that?
Yeah,
If
that's
not now, when?
Yeah, I think probably,
Rec and Parks, but
when we're, from what you just referenced, it'll probably be when we come back to the park, the Recs and Park budget, because we had multiple flags on that item. So, we don't have the January schedule quite, hammered out, but it's probably like mid-January.
Are they coming back again?
Yes.
Okay, but if they, from my understanding, from what they told me, they aren't responsible for that detail that I'm asking for, and she is responsible for that discrepancy. So if she's not going to answer that today, is she going to come back when Parks and Rec is presenting again in the future to discuss that?
I think in that case, can you put down your question a little bit in an email to us, and we'll make sure that we let you know which of the budget discussion days is the one where that'll be addressed. And we'll make sure that if Kim is the person to respond to that she's present at that meeting.
I think she meant Carol.
Okay, like if we have to like have that update publicly too, but like I did ask her that in a private email and I wasn't responded to yet. So whatever way works.
Okay, well, maybe it's going to be, okay, I understand now. So maybe we'll see whether that's responded to you privately and you get that information. And if not, then you can bring it up. You can ask which meeting in the budget discussion in January would be the appropriate one.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. No other hands in Zoom. Look into the room. Seeing none. Does this take a motion?
It's all lumped together in the.
Oh, it's all, okay, so then in that case, we're going to keep going.
Okay.
Kim.
Okay, so we also have our monthly financial report, our regular monthly financial report. This is for November of 2022. Where about 42% of the year, fiscal year completed. The general fund expenses are at about 39.4% of the annual budget. The utilities fund is about 39.7%, and the parking fund is at 35.7%. So we're trending very well on our 6 month here. The loan report has $4.1 million in outstanding loans issued through the town's loans programs. The town's revolving loan fund has $137,557 in available funds for additional grants. It does here say that we have one loan in collection status as of this date. That was as of the date that this report was done, December 6th. That has since been cured.
Oh, good.
We do not have any loan in collection status. As of November 30th, the grant report contains information on 25 active grants and 7 grants that are in the application process. And as we discussed at my last financial meeting, we wanted a full list of the funds and all their balances.
Yeah.
That is there. I know Jess specifically asked for the Community Safety Fund and now what is called the Global Warming Solutions Act Fund, which I guess better than the fossil free fuel
Facilities fund.
right? Exactly. So I did want to just say that
settled down.
Jess, I did send you the email. The Community Safety Fund has a balance of $300,228, and the Global Warming Solutions Act Fund has a balance of $224,741. If the board would like me to include this in my report monthly, that's, we can do that. I do just want to caveat that with that we make the transfers one time a year on basically almost all of these funds, except the grant fund, which you do get a report on. So if you'd like me to put this in the report, maybe once a year, every month, whatever the board decides they'd like to do.
Board, Daniel.
Yeah. Thank you, Kim, for being so responsive. I guess once a year might be too infrequent, because my memory is not that good. And so if it's not too much trouble, I'm assuming it's not a whole lot of extra work to include this in the report. So I think it wouldn't hurt to have it there as a little reminder.
No problem.
I do actually have some questions about a couple of the funds and the UDAG, Patrick. I remember talking about the UDAG not so long ago. Can you can you educate me and the rest of the world about what on earth it is and what it can be used for?
And just pause for a moment. This is the very last page
Oh,
of
thank you.
the entire.
It isn't even numbered.
It isn't numbered. It's that special. So go to the very end, and that's what we're talking about. Patrick.
So UDAG stands for Urban Development Action Grant. This is a grant that the town received, I believe directly from the U.S. Housing and Urban Development Office back in the 1980s. The funds were used to facilitate, I believe, the construction of what became the Holstein property. And the Holstein Association, no, actually, I take that back. I think it was the Marlboro Graduate Center proper. It was used for the construction of that. The Holstein Association eventually parted with that and needed to repay the town the monies that were granted to the town. They purchased an investment instrument that would mature and then repay the town I think it was 2.1 million or 2.2 million. Looks like 2.2 million that was owed to the town. And I believe that will be coming into maturity, I think quite soon, actually, in a couple of months.
February.
And so the initial plan, the one which was hatched back in, I think, the 80s, was that this would return to the revolving loan fund. We've done some research on the uses and plausible and permissible uses of that fund outside and beyond the revolving loan fund. And in a nutshell, I believe the short answer is that it can be used in a manner consistent with CDBG dollars. So it's got a similar set of requirements to community development block grant dollars. And we can go in more detail at some point in time as to what the federal regulations are on that program, if you'd like.
Follow up, Daniel?
Yeah, quick follow-up. So when this fund is available for use, I think it would be wise to come back to it and have a discussion about, the board's priorities for it. I mean, it strikes me that having a little over 2 million available for housing wouldn't hurt this community. So that is my entire comment.
Thank you, Daniel. Other board members? Liz.
Yeah, I would like to have that discussion because it could be that there's a broader use of funds than the revolving.
Other board members? No. Look to the public. Go on Zoom first. See a hand in the audience. Come on down.
Looking Dick DeGray, Brattleboro, looking for how much money is in the Nelson Withington Fund?
Nelson Worthington.
I don't know that we would know. I mean, it's managed by the Vermont Community Foundation and it's not held by the town.
We have two representatives that oversee that fund that are appointed by the town, are appointed by the board. I believe we always have.
Peter Richards and Richard
And-
Carroll.
And
yeah.
Rich Carroll?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Peter Richards is one of them, correct?
And Rich
Richard
Carroll
Carroll.
is the other.
What's your source on that, sir?
Brattleboro.org.
Thank you.
What's the name of that?
I'd like to
Nelson
think it's correct.
Withington Fund. And it has strict criteria what it can be used for. And
It's
which
private
is
owned.
strictly recreational.
Mhm.
I think it has something to do with trees as well, strangely enough.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about trees, but you might be correct.
He is correct.
Because I think that, when we're looking at the
If you're interested.
park project, other sources of money besides the ARPA fund. And I'm trying to, as I'm standing here, I'm trying to, roll the disc back to, I don't think that the board ever approved that, but Carol would say that you could apply for money for that. Because I actually thought about applying for some of those funds for doing some flowers up in West Brattleboro, but I never did. So my full recollection is I don't think it comes to the board, but it goes to the two representatives. So if you could find out some more information for that.
Yeah.
I spoke to Carol about it the other day and she mentioned that she was applying to the Worthington Fund and was speaking to the Worthington Fund, but it is not a municipal fund. It's private.
But I think it's interesting to know what if we've got reps from the town on it.
I mean, I always thought because it was a local fund, that's why Rich Carroll, who's very reputable and a close friend of mine, I always thought there were two Brattleboro representatives for the fund, although I think, Peter does live in Brattleboro. So,
There could be representatives, but I think it's a charity, a private
Okay.
charity.
all right, thank you.
Thank you. No other hands on Zoom. Anybody else in the room? Nope. All right, board, if there are any other questions or comments, I think I'd look for a motion.
I did have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We jumped right to the funds, but I had a question on the first page.
Yeah.
Oh, it does have to do with funds. Third paragraph, talking about utilities fund expenditures and parking fund expenditures. I was wondering if it would be worthwhile to have any tracking of the income for those two funds, or if it would be so
I think
delayed.
It's in there.
in here.
Is
right?
it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Well,
each
In
budget,
in the memo.
Oh,
I could put the revenue and expense total in that paragraph if you'd like, along with the percentage of where they are.
Yeah, I think for the parking fund, at least, since it is such a separate fund that tries to be self-sustaining, it would be very helpful to have. Just, if we're gonna have expenses.
we're not careful. The memo is going to get as long as the report.
It's a,
I'm joking. Yeah, Liz.
Jess's point is a very good one because, that building's no longer being rented.
Mhm.
And so that income will create a shortfall.
Sure.
Thanks.
Daniel.
Just to surface some numbers.
Page.
So, page 1 of the parking fund, page 1 of 2, I might add. It's towards the back.
Oh God, that's
Total revenue from the parking fund, basically $250,000. Total expenditures from the parking fund, $321,000. So
Thank you, Tom.
might be time for me to pay for parking a bit more often, I guess.
Other board members?
That's a lot of parking.
I know. I don't think I'm gonna do it.
I don't know.
Okay, in that case, unless, Jess, any other? Nope.
Good.
Okay, I would look for a motion.
This is the long one.
This is the long one.
Should I sing it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna do that.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to make a motion, however, to accept the independent auditor's report for FY 22 from Batchelder Associates PC and the accompanying financial statements prepared by town staff, and to accept the reports on schedule of expenditures of federal awards, internal controls, and compliance with laws and regulations known as the single audit, in quotes, for FY 22, and to accept the monthly financial report for the month of November as presented.
Excellent.
Could have been
Thank
a
you, Tim. Tim has made a motion to accept the independent auditor's report from FY 22 from Batchelder Associates PC and the accompanying financial statement prepared by town staff, and to accept the reports on schedule of expenditures of federal awards, internal controls, and compliance with laws and regulations known as the single audit, in quotations, for FY 22, and to accept the monthly financial report for the month of November as presented. Board members, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carries 5-0. Kim, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thanks, Kim.
All right.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to move on to new business agenda item 9B, which is the EMS feasibility study report by AP Triton. So I'm going to invite Rich Cannon up to the table, and I'll start with just a very, very brief preamble here. Rich has I think I understand about a 30-minute presentation for
Smidgen less.
Smidgen less. Excellent. I like to hear that. For the board and for the community. After that, I'm going to give the select board an opportunity to ask some questions, and then I'm going to open it up to the community to ask questions. This report became available to the community and to the select board at 5 o'clock this evening. And so, I think we've had an opportunity to do a quick peruse, but haven't had the opportunity to really take the deep dive. So we're going to get a presentation, and that will be very helpful. And we're not going to make any decisions tonight on anything. So what I'm hoping to do is take good notes, listen for questions that maybe need additional follow-up to get responses. I understand that the good folks from AP Triton will be available if we have follow-up questions after the fact. So we're going to make sure that we do that. And then finally, I think as we sort of close up this initial introduction and review of this report, the board's going to have a little bit of a discussion on kind of like what the next step is and sort of what we see as a timeline for the next time we're going to look at this report, because this certainly isn't going to be the last time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rich.
Thank you. Somehow may I have a presentation? In the top left corner. First of all, thank you folks very, very much for letting me come back here. It's a pleasure to be here. I even did a bunch of Christmas shopping today, so this is going to prove to be very fruitful. This is a complicated subject, and there's a great deal of information before you. And I actually think that it is the advantage. Most of it was just by circumstance of trying to have this meeting before the end of the year. So most of the reason you're getting this at 5 o'clock is on my shoulders, but it also serves the purpose of allowing me to navigate that document a little easier. I think after you hear a few minutes of this, it'll make you viewing that over the next few weeks, months, much easier to do. With that in mind, I would like the board's permission. Let me finish the presentation. I may answer your questions, and it might keep it sequential. And then I will stay as long as you want this evening. We can get as deep as you want into any topic and get into the details that anybody in the public would like to hear. So with that in mind, and your permission, I will get started.
Please.
Thank you. First of all, this is worth a reminder. Anytime you bring in an organization such as ours, there were a great many people from across the country, and this is very useful. It means you get a variety of opinions and, quite honestly, conflicting opinions. Different folks see different paths for the town of Brattleboro, and they're all in the document. So if every once in a while you see where one person is supporting one direction, another is supporting another, that is for the simple fact that they're coming from different perspectives, which you want. Now, in the end, the consensus was the same, but it's important to know that there was a lot of people involved and they come from across the country to do that for you. We were basically tasked with well, how do I want to say this? The purpose of us being here was to come up with options for the provision of emergency medical services. That's why we're here. We looked at a number of options. You folks are going to know them as 4, but the reality is the 4 options that we came up with could probably translate to 50 different options. And we're going to get to how that is. We wanted to create a foundation for you to make decisions, and then you can take that foundation and basically adjust it and mold it to whatever the needs of the community are and fulfill the way that you folks want this to go. The first thing we wanted to do is to come up with options that maintain the highest level of service delivery. That means that the care that you receive when that ambulance shows up to your door, I hope it's not anytime soon, that quality of care still exists. The second thing we wanted to know is all the options sustainable? You got to know that this is going to continue not 6 months, 3 years, but 10 years down the road. You want sustainability. We want performance. This is something I'm going to speak to a lot, but there are certain levels. This is a misunderstanding that I often face when I get to travel and speak, but we're going to talk about what the national standard is for performance and why. And I'm going to hopefully clear up a few misconceptions while we're doing it. And then, of course, this is fiscal responsibility. The provision of emergency services is utilizing the money of the community, the tax money, and it is imperative that we do that with fiscal responsibility. So we're going to talk about the financial side of this. It would be nice if it was all free and didn't cost anything, but it's not the case. So we have to figure out how to fund these programs. Starting with level of care, and I apologize, one of the things I'm going to do is probably pass over this relatively quickly, and then I'm more than happy to come back to it because you're going to have questions. I can see them coming. So we'll start out with level of care. The first thing that we discovered is that basically all the paramedics, and a few of them are in this room, all come from the same point. You got to get your nationally registered certification from the National Registry of EMT as a paramedic. That program is in all but 2 states. You're not one of those 2 states. You folks fall under the National Registry, and these individuals get that initial certification, and most of them will maintain their certification. There was a little bit of question about whether they could grandfather into a strictly Vermont, but to the best of my knowledge, I think they just maintain their National Registry. What I'm trying to say to you folks is these paramedics all came from the same place. Their certification was the same as, the rest of us across the country. And you're all under the same protocol, since a paramedic doesn't actually hold a license. Now there's variations to that in different states, but a paramedic functions under a medical physician's license. And that physician dictates what is known as protocol. And this says what exactly can be done as an intervention to an individual on an emergency scene. And everybody in District 13 is functioning under that blue book. Okay, that is the established protocol for District 13 as designated by the state of Vermont. The next thing is all agencies have the same medical director. You have a medical director and you have a co-medical director. So that didn't change regardless, and it will not change regardless of what model that you folks should select. You're still going to be under the same District 13 medical director. This was important. We went to a great deal of effort to find out if there was any statistical or documented deficiencies in the provision of medical care leading up to June of this year and after June. The care provided prior to June of 2022 was excellent, and the care continuing forward throughout this past 6 months has also been excellent. So the bottom line is it does not appear that the level of care has to be a significant factor in your determination for which model that you pick. You're going to get good care regardless of the model that you take. We did identify there is and this is just getting through that all of your paramedics start out as National Registry and maintain that. There was some question about this bullet here, is that particularly Rescue Inc., some of their members, I think the majority of their members, hold what is known as a critical care endorsement on their paramedic. Every state across the country has a different version of this. We participate in creating many of these programs throughout the country, and they are almost 100% for interfacility transfers. They are an excellent program. It basically facilitates taking a patient of criticality and they're still on a ventilator, there's certain infusion pumps, there's certain medications, and it facilitates moving that patient from Brattleboro Memorial Hospital to definitive care somewhere else. We're not talking about that. So this discussion that was out of the scope, interfacility transfers will continue to be provided most likely by Rescue Inc., but it does not have bearing on your 911 system. That doesn't say it doesn't have bearing on any 911 system, just not this one. You folks have a 6 to 8 minute transport. It would almost be inappropriate in most cases to provide any of those types of care, putting you on a ventilator when the hospital is right over here. Systems don't do that. On occasion, I came from one where we had critical care paramedics because we had transports that measured into hours. But to make sure that that was true and that we were doing due diligence, we reached out to the state of Vermont, and this will be hard for you to see up here, so I'll just have to describe for you. But there were only 4, and I've got several pages of these, but I'll go back to this one here. We only identified 4 skill sets that most of the country would say falls under the purview of a critical care paramedic, particularly the use of a ventilator. We then looked to see what kind of call these were, and these were interfacility transfers. So what I'm trying to say is I think that you folks can take that component off of your very difficult decision. The care you received before, currently, and in the future will be very consistent, and you don't have to use that as a major factor. Now, if a new program were to establish and you're trying to do interfacility, okay, this is probably something that has to be discussed, because there are some situations where they're required to do that transfer from one facility to the other. Either they have to have nursing staff do it, registered nurses, or these paramedics. But in this case, I think you can take that off the table. The care is going to be consistent with the options that you folks get to pick from.
There's a black bar at the top of the.
I didn't do that.
Yeah,
I know it's Zoom.
If it's Zoom,
It's just
we could just
yeah.
try to. There we go.
Yeah.
Now you can at least see the titles.
Yeah. I just want to see the whole thing.
Okay.
I don't want to miss something. Kind
I
of important,
appreciate that. Great.
right?
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's perfect. But when you're looking at
Thank you.
the report itself, what these 2 pages show is last year in 2021, exactly what the paramedics did in the town of Brattleboro. And so you can see that, and like I said, the rest of these procedures that come across, these are done by paramedics across the country. These are pretty routine skills and skill sets that are provided. The next thing is sustainability. And as I said, I'll get back to care a little bit later. I enjoyed this topic, sustainability. I'll be honest with you, when I travel or AP Triton travels, a private ambulance has very questionable sustainability. They come and go, even the major ones like AMR and these kind. We were always worried about whether a private ambulance, because they're a business, and depending on the circumstances of the business environment, whether they remain in business. That's not the case here. Rescue Inc. has been around since 1966. 3 years after my lovely birth. Okay, so I think this is sustainable. This organization has maintained a level of service and has been very successful doing so. Currently, you're being serviced by Golden Cross Ambulance, who was basically started in 1962. This is also impressive. You may have 2 of the oldest private ambulances in the country. Both have proven to be successful, but not to be outdone by this one. The town of Brattleboro has been here since 1753. I think you're sticking around. I really do. So I don't think sustainability is going to be a major consideration in the options that you select. I think patient care will be consistent. I think all 3 entities have proven sustainability. So I think you can move that a little bit to the side when you're making a difficult choice. Responsive performance. This is probably one of the most misunderstood concepts, as I said earlier when I speak. The first question that comes down to it is, does EMS total response or response actually matter? We get a couple of variations. Private ambulances like the AMRs, the GMRs, the Falk ambulances, they very much want to explain that it doesn't matter when the ambulance gets there, because it translates to profit. If they have slower response times, they need less units on the street, which means higher profit margin. So they're very big proponents of it. There is also some great research that supports that if one of you nice folks happens to break your ankle, does it warrant an engine and an ambulance going screaming through the city, lights and siren, to come help you? There's some validity to that. But that needs to be put on this side of the page, because there isn't anybody debating anything about certain types of emergencies that do not have any leeway. One of those starts out to be trauma. Traumatic events, basically you go from 7 minutes of that transport capacity to 12, drops you to 46% of death, or increases your possibility of death to 46%. So, and there's nobody in the country debating this issue that traumatic events seconds count. Another one that you're very familiar with is if you have a heart attack. There isn't anybody in this country that debates that the moment you have this event, the cardiac event, to the time you have definitive care, every second counts. I'll show you the problem with these. And of course, strokes go with the same thing. There is absolutely nobody that will argue that if an individual has a stroke, every second that you can, or that minimize, the odds of success are much higher and better outcomes. Here's the problem. And I understand that it's kind of hard to see this, but I'll explain it, is these events, whether I'm talking, well, it can be trauma, that one's pretty black and white, but certainly cardiac and stroke can manifest in almost a third of those type of calls. I can tell you that chest pain is a very predictable, you might be having a heart attack, but also I have been on cardiac events that started out as a seizure. I have been on cardiac events that became a syncopal, meaning they passed out. We have altered mentation. Basically, it's a pump. If it doesn't perfuse, then it's going to alter your mentation. So many of these emergencies, initially, we're not entirely sure what we're going to, and then we get there and find out that these, it's a completely different event. For this reason, and based on your call volume, your dispatch is doing an excellent job. We spent a lot of time there. We had to address a particular issue. We wanted to find out about any delays that might be going out to different entities. And I will tell you that we did not find delays more than about 6 or 7 seconds. But what we definitely found is, even though your dispatch is doing an excellent job, with the call volume that they have, you would have to spend enormous amounts of money in what's called EMD programs. This is hardware training certification. This happens to be my organization, the one I recently retired from. That blue screen is looking at is dictating how they provide this kind of initial care. These kind of programs will be useful, and maybe in the future is something for you to think about. But the reality is, with your call volume, your criticality, I don't think you're going to get as much benefit out of it as, just quite frankly, for most of these events, you need an emergent response and get the resources there. If you're in New York, Denver, Long Beach, California, then you start having issues where we really do have to manage these. I'm not saying that Brattleboro won't become LA, but not yet. So consequently, I think right now, response performance should be considered a pretty standard requirement. I say that because this is what you're going to read in that book. And one of the things I want to give to you folks is the tools to make an educated decision. Things are misrepresented on occasion, sometimes intentionally, sometimes they are not. But oftentimes you will hear an organization say that our average response time, our average to get to your house is this amount, and a contractual agreement is written, and a municipality then says, okay, here's the average requirement, and then they go out looking for a provider that will give them that response. It's actually a fallacy. And all of the national standards do not use averages, and I will show you why. If, let's just be hypothetical, and by the way, there isn't anything more than Rich made these numbers up, okay? Let's hypothetically say that your municipality said that the standard for this community is a minimum response time of 6.5 minutes. And I'm going to talk about that there should eventually be a resolution that requires minimum standards in the town of Brattleboro. It's critical. We'll get to that in a moment. And now this Alpha organization has the following 10 events. It took them 7 minutes to get to that patient. It took them 7.5, then 8 minutes, another 7, 8.5 minutes. Then the call occurred right around the corner. They practically stumbled on it and got a 2-minute. The next one, the patient walked up to the ambulance and said, "My father's having a heart attack." Obviously, that's nearly a 1 minute, another 2 minute, and then a 9 minute. If you put those together, and I know you folks are all statisticians, you add those up, you divide by 10, and it's got a 6-minute average response time. Now, on the surface, that would appear to be exceptional, exceeding expectations. Would you not agree? It's also not true. All right. Percentile, which is what all national standards are written on, and the document in front of you is 100% based on percentiles. We look at it and say, okay, if the standard is 6.5 minutes, we want to know how many people received that level of service. And out of these 10 people, only 3 received the service they should have received. That meant the other 7 did not get the care that they should have received, which is why this country bases on percentile. Now, a community can decide, do we want to be at a certain level on the 90th percentile? 9 patients out of 10 get this level. Now, that does vary. I'll give you an example. Having come from Denver, I sometimes do the ski areas and that kind of thing. They cannot have a 90th percentile for response time because at least 20% of the time there's a blizzard going. They just can't get across town that way. You folks aren't far from that. You've got a pretty nice pile of snow here. So consequently, that is a standard that you speak with your emergency providers, you talk about expectations of the community, and you write whether it's an 80th percentile or a 90th percentile. But I can tell you here, for those numbers, the 90th percentile, if that was your standard, they're at 8.9, almost 9 minutes. This would be completely unacceptable. And with the exception of Brattleboro, most organizations that have an established contract with an entity, yours doesn't have any performance measures. We want it to have performance measures. And this would be a violation. And in some systems, I would say the majority of them, failure to meet those expectations results in fines, or you discontinue the contract or other measures. If it's a municipal department, then you are very upset and you want some answers from your provider, whether it be the fire department or third service ambulance or whatever your system has. So the reason I put that up was not to give you a statistics, although I do have that background, is that when you're reading this book, make sure you're doing apples to apples, because I have seen things written that aren't apple to apple. So you got to know what you're comparing. Okay. That is the national standard. We base it either on the 80th or 90th percentile, and averages have nothing. There is the 90th percentile, knowing that that's how we measure for Golden Cross, which of course is from June. Well, I guess we'd have to say July 1st until November. And then I have 1 year of 90th percentile for Rescue Inc. and the Brattleboro Fire Department, because they're coming from different places. This does not support a conclusion by any means. First of all, there isn't a standard for the town of Brattleboro. So it's not that they did or did not meet any particular performance. It doesn't exist. But what I think it definitively says is that care did not go down as of June. That's important. So it means that they were providing good care before. Obviously, they're continuing to provide, adequate performance times. And I don't think this has to be a consideration, but for your edification, we showed you what the statistical 90th percentile was in 2021. And then of course, that document you have, we very with a great deal of detail went through Brattleboro Fire and looked at the rest of them, their fire response, because it was also part of the scope of work to do a little deeper dive into their performance. I will let you read that. It was very good. I'm just going to stay tonight focused on the EMS side. This is what it is probably one of the strongest recommendations that we're making as an organization to you folks, is that you build the foundation first Then you establish what system that you want to meet that expectation. What we've done is we put in Appendix B in your document is a sample draft of a resolution that eventually I would hope that you folks would vote and adopt. Now, it does not become a legal entity or document. It simply says that the town of Brattleboro has set the bar here. Our benchmark is at this spot, and that is our goal. That is how we decide when we hire new staffing, when we build fire stations, whether we buy apparatus. It's based on the foundation that you said, this is what we want. Nothing in this document here is you. I simply created a template. Okay, I take that back a little. We kind of tailored it to the way it looks right now, but you as an organization would have to decide what is the level of service. And here's the really difficult question. Once you decide what the level of service is, what are you willing to pay for? I told you this the last time I was here. A constituent could say, I want a fire engine or an ambulance at my house in 2 minutes. I can help you build that system, but it's going to take 6 fire stations, and it's going to take a great deal of firefighters and EMTs and paramedics. It might be cost prohibitive in the town of Brattleboro. You folks have to decide what is right for you. There is, and it's a long document. You would obviously hand this over to your city attorney to write it better than I did. But basically, each benchmark, not only for EMS, for fire, for hazardous materials, special rescue, whatever circumstances you have, I have seen this document includes law enforcement. Usually it's better to separate those out. You do fire and EMS together, you do law enforcement separate. But to be a little bit redundant, folks, I strongly encourage you to clear this up, decide what you want, write this document, and make it a resolution, and then select an option, because now you have a foundation to build a house on. I will show you that these are your constituents. So they were asked, and I particularly put faith in this because I've never had a response to a survey to the level that we had here. And for your own entertainment and edification, I put all those comments in the back of this document, and there are a lot of them. And I think they're very useful just to peruse through. But for the purposes of this, 31% of your constituents believe they should have emergency services, fire and EMS within 4 minutes. You add another 41%, if my eyes are doing okay here, you want it within, or they want it within 6 minutes. Then you start having a 12% that want it in 8, and then the final 16% that say, okay, 10. This also does not support a conclusion, but it's definitely, you realize your constituents definitely want performance, and it's something for you to consider when you build this resolution. Okay, fiscal responsibility. I'd like to first give a compliment. The effort that folks went into from the fire department to your finance department to administration was amazing. The amount of information we drug out of these people was mind-numbing. I truly am not going to get Christmas cards from anybody. But because of that level of involvement, we're able to give you a very clean, and I will tell you successful, we do this quite a bit. The predictions and the options that we provide you, I think, are very valid. And we routinely have to prove this over the course of a project. To do this system, and this was probably the lion's share of this project, we start out by trying to find the cost of providing services. Most of you have, or either own a business, or you certainly understand a business. You can't start a business if you don't know what it costs to produce your product. We had to figure out, and it is critical to find out what the cost is to provide ambulance service to the town of Brattleboro. There's no place to go until you have that number. Then we look at your payer mix, because we have to figure out how much money you can get back. And I'll show you, and you certainly understand. You have a unique environment. You're 50% Medicare in this community. By the way, that's good. Now, the private ambulances, the big ones, they wouldn't like this, because there's just, there's a certain percentage that they just don't get out of the billing, and it's not lucrative. But the reality is it's very predictable. The government's going to pay you. Even regardless of the politics going on, Medicare is a very consistent. They just don't pay as much as, commercial insurance. But we first have to go through and determine what your payer mix is. We worked with 2 other billing companies, and Golden Cross was exceptional in providing us information. Between the 3 of them, we have what we believe is a very accurate evaluation of what this community looks like. Then we do billing rates. This is also a huge misunderstanding across the country, and I'm going to clear that up for you tonight. Hold that thought about billing rates and this billing policy that I'm going to get to in detail in just a moment. But you take those 3 items. Now, the billing rate is obviously, do we charge $500 for this ambulance transport, or do we charge $5,000 for this ambulance transport? Which surprisingly isn't that out of order, but and then billing policy is the one that really changes everything. It basically says the government, and I'll show you the actual law, is that every person must receive a bill. Okay, because the federal government has to get your best, so you can't bill one person $50 and then turn around and bill the government $5,000. That borders on fraud. All right. So every person has to get a bill, and then each entity will pay a certain percentage of that bill, depending on the circumstances, whether you're a Medicare or private pay. A municipality and a private business has the decision of whether or not, what do they want to do when the individual's insurance paid, what do they do with the rest of it? You have the power to simply say, we're just not going to collect anymore. If your insurance pays $100, that is the end of the bill. Many organizations, including Rescue Inc. prior to June, would do a subscription program that say, okay, we're going to bill your insurance company. And then if you have the subscription, then that's it. We won't ask for any more. It's not going to go to collections. If you have one of the major providers, the AMRs, they're going to send you to collections. You're going to get it to insurance, and then they're going to make sure they get the rest. They are a very astute business organization. That's what we'll call them. All right. But they're also very aggressive. You as an institution can pick and choose your billing policy depending on what you want to do. And I've got municipalities all over it. I have one that does a tax base, a separate tax, just to make sure that the constituents never pay any. The subscription programs are fantastic and they work. There are many can do. And when you get down to if that is a possibility, there are many things I can provide. You can go talk to some of these town managers and they will help you get through that. But the important thing is the payer mix, the billing rate, and the billing policy translate to how much money you're going to get from this system. And with reasonable expectation, because of course you've got to know what your money is. When you compare the cost of providing with the amount of revenue you can generate, then you're either losing or you are not. You are either in business or you are not. Or in this case, you are either subsidizing a program internally if you're a municipality, or you're paying a subsidy to a private entity to fill the gap. This happens a lot. I mean, I would say that I'm just guessing here, but 80% of the time I go into a municipality, it costs this much to provide service. We can only generate this amount of money with what you see on those 3 payer mix billing rates and policy. And then there's a gap. Now you have a subsidy. I will say that in the absence of knowing that information, there should not be a subsidy. I've never seen a municipality that would support a subsidy without seeing the exact cost with what is collected. And then a municipality should step up to help fill that gap in if it is necessary. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Same internally. You could say, okay, we're going to do a third service ambulance, which is, you have fire, law enforcement. When I say third service, EMS is under the city or the town, but it's a separate entity. The city of Denver is one of those examples. They have 3 separate entities, but they're city umbrella. Okay. In that case, when you have a gap between what is billed and what it costs to do business, it comes out of the general fund. So you've got to say to yourself, yes, we're willing to pay this amount of money out of our general fund, which means it doesn't go to parks, it doesn't go to, road maintenance, it doesn't go to all the other services. You folks have to make a big decision. I just wanted to make sure that we're using the right words before I get too deep in the weeds. So let's start with the cost of providing service. AP Triton is very accurate. We're very conservative. We leave out other funding that is probably available to keep this so that we basically look really good. Okay, so basically looking up here, we estimate the cost of running a 2-ambulance system in Brattleboro in the environment that it is in at about 1.239 million. That is the cost of providing service. Now, we are being very conservative. There's probably, like I said, there's going to be a little bit of change if the revenues were different. I think that, and we worked a lot with your finance, you probably are going to have a little more money that you port towards capital. But to give you a framework or a foundation to work from, this number will prove to be very accurate, that it'll be about $1,239,000 to run an EMS transport system. Now, this is separate from what you're doing with your fire department, and they're bringing engines to provide first response and that kind of thing. We then calculate, and this is an important number up here, the cost that when you break that down by the number of hours in a year. So you basically take 2 ambulances. That means it's 24 hours a day, multiply 48 times 365, and you get 17,520. The only reason I give you that is if you go out to bid with a private ambulance, such as the AMRs and those kind of entities, they will always tell you, and all contracts are negotiated from that bottom number. We're going to charge you $130 per unit hour, 1 ambulance. This is a very efficient system here. The cost is lower here. And we validated that by accident, actually. The nice folks at Golden Cross, they are at $68.20 per unit hour to provide what they're doing for you right now in Brattleboro. Now, there's some skewing that has to be reminded here, because that doesn't include, remember, 2 of your firefighters are coming off of your existing apparatus to come down, which I really want to talk about. And there's a little bit of the idea of, you know, are they really leasing that 3rd ambulance to you? And so there's a little subjectivity, but this is still a very good foundation. I will tell you that the AMRs of the world will not come talk to you unless you'll negotiate somewhere over $110 per unit hour, 1 ambulance, which is why they will not be bidding for your system. It's just not lucrative enough, but they also have all the overhead. The reason this number is so low for you folks is a significant portion of the services required to do business are sitting here at the table. You have the infrastructure, you have an attorney. Ma'am, are you the attorney?
Not.
Okay. There's the city attorney, there's HR, there's, all the different components that an AMR will tie into the cost, which we get to back out a little bit because it's a municipal department. So I'm not saying that there couldn't be holes shot in this, but I can say that we're successful with the numbers, and this is a good framework to start from, is that 2 ambulances is about $70 a unit hour. And you have that total amount in your mind right now. Take this and we move on to your constituents. We not only know the percentage of whether they're Medicare, New Hampshire Medicaid versus Vermont Medicaid. We also know how many of those types of calls occurred. And that's that transports on the middle column right there. When we put this together, we did it about 1,776. It sounded very patriotic, but the reality is you are higher this year. So again, we're being conservative just to make sure that you folks are at the right, foundation. Based on this and these numbers and the percentage of it, and I should qualify a little bit, and now's probably a good time to discuss the bill. Medicare, Medicaid, both of them, and a little bit of the veterans, which is a little bit different, but not by much, have a very fixed rate. It doesn't matter if you send a bill to that person for $5,000, you're going to get $538. And it's just rough. It varies a little bit depending on where you are in the country, but that's about where you folks are. All right. Doesn't matter what you send them, you're going to get that body of money. Now, there are some very specific laws. Medicare, most people, or not most people, but many people have supplemental programs because it doesn't cover all the expenses either. And then you get a supplemental program, and you can use the subscription program can apply a little bit to Medicare. Subscription programs can never be sold to anybody on a Medicaid program. That's against the law. That is the amount of money. You can't ask for more. You can ask for all you want, but that's what you're going to get. So far, so good. That being said, the bill for an ambulance should be somewhere around $1,500 minimum, because the only entity that you're doing a favor to is commercial insurance. Vermont has some unique laws in the sense that they have to pay it. All right. Now there's some limitations to that, but you send Blue Cross and Blue Shield the bill, they're required to cover the $1,500 bill less. You have particular co-pays that you have to do. Your program is the high deductible versus, that depends on what the person picks. But you never want to send a $500 bill to Blue Cross and Blue Shield. They don't care about Brattleboro. You send them the full amount, and then they're going to do the appropriate amount that comes back. So the only service that you're doing by sending a $500 bill out is to Blue Cross and Blue Shield or these major insurance companies. Now, your constituents, especially, let's say that they have a high deductible, your constituents, that's when you get into a philosophy. What do you want to do with the remaining balance, whether it is their copay, whether it's their deductible, whether, whatever comes involved in that? You as a municipality or a private organization gets to pick what their philosophy is going to be. I was somewhat surprised. Golden Cross is very low. They would probably do well to change their pay structure because, again, they're doing a favor for the wrong entity. Rescue Inc. is already charging that. I think there were some misconceptions, but I only have their 2018 bills, but they were $1,200 plus the extras in there. So they were already at the $1,400 mark. And then for critical care transport, it was substantially higher, which is appropriate. So this isn't a surprise. I just don't want anybody to all of a sudden get nervous. It's like, oh my gosh, we're at 500 now. Suddenly it's 2,000. There's a misconception there. Now we calculate, and it is what AP Triton is most known for, is we look at this and we want you just underneath the national average, which is about $1,500. So we calculated you at $1,400 of transport. Now, again, Medicare and Medicaid and the veterans, you're going to get your $530. It is the commercial insurance that you will get a larger portion of that depending on the individual's policy. And I'm not trying to be redundant, but it's usually something that gets everybody upset and they don't need to be. And this is the interesting thing about the number sitting in front of you. We're not including any calculate or collections at all. We're saying you chose not to ever make anybody pay you anything beyond what the insurance company does. Now you've got to bill the insurance company, otherwise you're going to get in trouble for Medicare. So we estimate that this system very comfortably should be at about $2.4 million if billed correctly. And that's an open statement, but this has to be done right. And there are many ways to do that. There are commercial programs out there. And one of the misconceptions, and we wrote about it in there, is medical billing is not complicated for EMS. It accounts for about 3 chapters. There's nothing to it. It's a very simplistic. Now, if you run a hospital, if you run a nursing home, this becomes very complicated. But in our case, quite frankly, the city could do the billing and they would do fine. You probably wouldn't, but a private ambulance typically has a separate private company that does their billing. So it works unless you're the AMR, and they certainly do their own billing. We estimate that out of that $2.4 million, you will gather, when it says cash collections, we could come up with other terms. It just means that's real money. We believe that this system will create $935,000 in revenue, real revenue. That number is going to be important here in just a moment. Moving down, as I said, we're setting the rate at $1,400. This is more of a philosophical statement to say, you're below the national average. But really, most of the country is higher than that. And you would adjust this depending on your cost of doing business. should determine what you charge. This is also something that is just normal business. And if you're not making enough to cover your expenses, perhaps you change your billing rate because it's only going to affect one entity up here. And then collections per transport is going to be about $534. That takes into account, remember, some of these people don't have insurance and they're not going to pay at all. That's the nature of what we work with. Okay, the number to look at is that $935,000 because it'll translate to coming up. This is simply talking about policy. Everybody has to get a bill, or it's called cherry picking. And then how aggressive is left up to the private or the public entity to decide what they want to do. Models. All right, I'll take a quick 2-second breath. But based on that information, we now know what it costs to provide service. We know what you can collect in revenue for that. Based on those two numbers, we also know that there will be subsidies that are required in some cases. Then we did the models. We took all the finance out. So I'm going to go through 4 models, and I'm going to do what the people across this country working on this project were the pros and cons of these models. Then I'm going to plug in some financial information at the very end. So with that in mind, the first one is to negotiate a contract with Rescue Inc. There's a couple of omissions. The pro of this, of course, is they've been providing excellent service for 50 years. I don't think there's any question, and you could go back to that system. The cons is a lack of accountability and transparency. To do a contract with anybody, there should be the requirement of the transparency of the cost of doing business, the collection, and then show us where the gap is, show us where the subsidy is required, regardless of what system you do and don't pick. But this one here has a little bit of a transparency issue. Another con is you have a lack of control over your public safety. Most communities want to control public safety. It falls on your shoulders. The burden is on your shoulders, and it probably should be on your shoulders to some extent. The way to translate that into a private business is I need that resolution. And in a contractual agreement, you would say in that contractual agreement, these are the standards you're expected to meet. These are the expectations, and here are the penalties if you do not meet them. I've not known an organization until I came to Brattleboro that had a contractual agreement without them. So I would like you to put them in, please, regardless of what you pick. Another con is you got to repeat this every 3 to 5 years. Now, this would be to my benefit because I like coming here. This is a very nice place. But the reality is you have to repeat this because you're not going to do, and it would be unacceptable to do anything more than a 5-year for a municipal contract. Things change too much. It's too dynamic. So 3 to 5 years is the standard, and somewhere in there. Now you can always write in with the option to add 3 years. There's all these kind of language, and your attorney can certainly fix all that. And then Rescue Inc. is going to require a subsidy of $288,240. Again, may be very reasonable, but we would say as an institution, AP Triton, that number has to be validated. It is a true difference between the cost of doing business and what is collected. And then perhaps Brattleboro, quite frankly, maybe a subsidy is appropriate. So there's the first model. Model number 2 is a fire-based system. There are 2 versions of this. This one here creates one of the 2 ambulances is a 24-hour day with firefighters. There's some advantage that could come into that. And then you have a day car. One of the things you'll see, and it's in the middle of your document called service delivery. Don't stare at it now, but the reality one's the one I give you, the nice book suitable for framing. They're beautiful graphs and statistics. But one of the things it shows is that you have a necessity for emergency services at night, but they're not common. Most people get hurt during the day, and it's actually a pretty busy system. So consequently, you need a system that is somewhere between 10-hour and a 12-hour car. And we showed you in that peak demand, we actually show you specifically what hours of the day to cover this. And then at night, it's gone back to what's called cross-staffing. That system is prevalent across the country. And basically for those occasional calls that occur, you're going to take your crew off the engine, you're going to put them on an ambulance, and they're going to take the second and third call that comes in that particular evening. And then beyond that, you're calling for mutual aid like every other system does. So one of the pros of this is, again, it'll be quality EMS. just as an option one. Rescue Inc.'s been providing quality EMS. Second pro, under the system that we drew up, it brings 10 additional firefighters to the system. This is a problem for you folks. I don't want to sound negative, but in the necessity that occurred in June, you pulled firefighters off of an engine and put them on an ambulance. And quite frankly, your minimum response isn't close to the national standard. It is very important that you get those firefighters back on that engine. With them on the engine, you are still not meeting anywhere close to national standards for the number of firefighters. I'm going to discuss that in a little bit later. It is probably the only deficit because we were also asked to evaluate the system for their capacity to even consider something new, and that is definitely a deficit. There's a lot of debate about how many people you need on an engine or how many people you need on a truck, but what is statistically proven is how many do you need at the fire in 8 minutes to actually perform a rescue or to stop this fire from turning into a conflagration. The national standard is 17. I don't know, but a handful of systems that actually do that. It's just very cost prohibitive. You folks need to get closer to 12. All right. Now that wouldn't meet the national standard, but what you're doing right now is working, but you're completely dependent on your neighbors all coming here. And the problem that comes down is when they are having their own capacity issues and they can't come here. So long term, you should think about this separate from the EMS side, but you should think about you need to increase that capacity a little bit. And there's a great deal written about that piece of the fire service. This particular one would put 10 additional firefighters, which is about 3 a day, into the system because you have that one extra ambulance that's staffed with firefighters. So it would help. You're not going to meet the national standard, but you're going to be much closer than you are right now. Public safety is under the control of the town of Brattleboro. That is a pro. You folks can hold them to any standard you want to. They work for you. Your expectations or whatever, you guys make an announcement and then the town manager has to carry that out to the fire chief. So it occurs. That is a pro. You don't have to repeat this process every 3 to 5 years. You own them for the rest of time. And I think after we look to sustainability, Brattleboro will be here for a while. The cons of this is we look at this model. Now that's taking you from right now you are staffing 2 ambulances 24 hours a day. That is with 2 Golden Cross personnel, 2 firefighters who've been pulled off the engine, and you keep those 2 ambulances going 24. That's a good system and it's working well. I have issues with what it's doing to the fire side of it, but it's a very usable system and it is working. To put them into this system would drop you down to a day car where you're staffing that ambulance during the day. You're not staffing it at night, but with your call volume, it probably would work, but it's going to cost your general fund $91,796 a year to run that system. So it's something for you to put. That's what it's going to cost to run it. It does decrease, as I just explained, but I think statistically, if you wanted to choose this option, it is very feasible. And I would say that many municipalities, this would be there. This would be an option. Another con is the fact that you've got to come up with the capital equipment for this. It requires ambulances. Now, most of your infrastructure for your medical equipment, you already own. It's in different places. We would be moving that to some place, well, an ambulance off of an engine. But the fact is you own a great deal of this equipment, but there's going to be a capital outlay, and I'm about to show that to you here in a moment. The third option is your current system. I would just discourage this system only from the standpoint of you're compromising your effective response force a lot. And they have proven once you get this number into the stage that you are, firefighters get killed and people can't be rescued. You just don't have the resources to go in and do that. So it's something I want you to think about. I think this was absolutely necessary and it has been successful. I would just encourage you to move beyond this one and come up with one of the other 3. But looking at this, it is a good quality EMS system. Since June, we do not have any statistical or documented examples of compromised care. Cons of this, as I said, we're compromising the effective response force. There is a subsidy attached to this one. Golden Cross is requiring $125,000. And then you've got to repeat this every 3 to 5 years. Option 4 is to go to exactly what you have. It is all fire-based. You have 2 24-hour ambulances. They're staffed with firefighters. Again, the care will be quality. It'll put, it maintains the current level that you have. You have 12 additional firefighters in the system. Now you are getting close to being able to meet the national standard for the overall response. As I've said before, public safety falls under the control of Brattleboro, and you don't have to repeat this process, which means I don't get to come back and see you folks. Something to consider. I definitely want it on the list. The cons of this is that system right now would cost you $309,843 out of the general fund. Okay, that's real money. All right. To an extent, we haven't talked about what you could collect, but that is what it would cost. And there would be, in the initial year, there's a pretty substantial capital equipment discussion that has to take place to have the equipment to do this. With this, and I know full well that I'm going to be coming back to these here shortly, I wanted to show you a financial statement. To do that, the board will go blind. This is in your document. I don't ask a judge.
No, you can't.
I think I have it already.
And you probably do.
Thank you
I
very
just
much.
want to make sure that as we're talking, I don't have enough for the whole room, but I at least want to get started.
Is it going up? Oh, thank you.
Where's our?
I mean, it's not.
It just,
Use the legal.
would you mind just making a couple of copies? Circulating.
And that's page 97 of the full report.
And I wasn't going to do that. It's up on the screen, and then I realized there's not many humans that can see the screen. So that being said, and I'm going to stand. Is it okay if I can walk around a little
Please.
bit?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Now what I did is that not allowed? And I
Yeah.
You need a mic.
I can talk here. I just can't see it. There we go. So option 1 is, and again, what I'm trying to show here is they're all possible. Okay, these are all good possible. So I think it affords you the opportunity for you to, communicate with the constituency, the community, to make a decision. But regardless of what option you pick, they're all possible. We didn't expect that. We kind of go into it and see where the cards land. Option 1, which is basically going to take and give it back to Rescue Inc., it translates all the way down. It's the $288,000 subsidy, and the conversation is done. And the pros and cons were what you saw up there. Option 2 is to add that 24-hour car to the fire service, a 10-hour car under the umbrella of the fire service. That could also be what we call single role. That might just be a paramedic and EMT that aren't firefighters for a while until this thing grows into something else. But it translates down to out of the general fund. And keep in mind, what I have to put in there is after option 2, now you get to add in the revenue. It's your money now. And so you'll see that $935,626. When you add that into the 1.027 million, it translates to basically the annual general fund is 91,796. Okay.
Yep.
If you picked option 3, and I'm just making sure that I'm being crystal clear on this, and there was also under option 2, which shows the expenses, everything from depreciation to equipment to legal services to subscriptions. We get into a lot of detail, and your report breaks this out even further. So we have a pretty good idea of what it costs to run a system. Option 3, now we're going to get to exactly where we are today. So you see it up there. You have 2 firefighters at $462,000. They've been pulled off your engine and they're actually on that ambulance. Then you have some overtime costs for those 2 firefighters who are supporting Golden Cross. And I want to emphasize, I think it was a necessary event and it has been successful. That comes out to help me out here. Salary and benefits 504. We're losing your. No problem. I'll sit back down. 504. Actually, can I steal yours? You could stand over here. That's what I mean.
And you want to take over that mic? That mic?
Then I really feel out of place.
Okay.
I'll just sit down back to my spot. Thank you. Moving this down, we estimate operating costs at $629,000 for option 3. Because remember, we have to calculate those 2 firefighters have now moved to a private enterprise, but the private enterprise keeps the money and they get a $125,000 subsidy, which I want to quit using that word. The general fund impact in reality right now is $629,000. A necessary event, but probably not something that has longevity. Option 4 is if you took, and again, it became 100% under the town of Brattleboro, either third service or under the fire department, more than likely under the fire department because it has the facilities already built and the infrastructure. But if you translate this all the way down, the general impact would be about $309,000 a year to run this system. Now, there's a couple of things I want to add to it. It shows what the impact would be at year 1 for your capital equipment. And that's a pretty sizable chunk of money. That's $800,000. You're already doing a little bit of that for year 1. Option 2, it's $400,000. To explain that is on a temporary basis, you folks are probably going to lease. You're going to buy used. There's a little lower cost, but eventually you're going to have to, start buying new ambulances and have the system in place to depreciate them and eventually replace them under a capital replacement program. So I put all that on a page, knowing that, and about to close this out, knowing that you folks can take the level of care pretty much out of it, although there'll be discussion, but based on what we have, I think that you're going to get good care all the way around. We know that the 3 entities are very sustainable. So I think it gets back down to what is the level of service that I want first, create a resolution and establish that level of service. Then it shows you can decide what monies you want to allocate and how you want to accomplish this into the future. With that, your favorite slide, recommendations. These are important recommendations, but they're not what you would expect. I don't live in the town of Brattleboro. So this is your constituents that are going to really have to help you pick the level of service you want, not AP Triton or Rich. There are some that we feel strongly about. One of them is your effective response force. I don't want to see a firefighter. I don't want to show up for a funeral. That's got to be fixed, and the long-term staffing for your fire department, you ought to try to get a little closer to the national standard, even though you'll never get to the NFPA 17 people. I don't know a lot of communities that can, and almost none that are this size. So, but it's something that I want you to think about to fix that one soon. The level of EMS care will be the same. All right. There's always sibling rivalry, but they got the same foundation when they became paramedics. The critical care component is necessary, but not for 911. And so I think this factor here can be minimized. The sustainability we have already talked about. And regardless, and I know I'm being redundant, you guys start with what you want for a foundation. Determine the level of service you want first, vote on it, put it on a piece of paper, then pick one of the options. Then the reality is you folks are going to probably take of those 4 options and you'll hybrid them. You can take pieces of each one, and we've created a foundation that you can move money. You could have option 2 where you're putting a full-time fire department ambulance, but a private is still doing the day car system. There are many versions you folks could do with this, and I think you now have the tools that you can combine them depending on the nature of what this board and what your constituents want you to do. Now, take a deep breath, and how can I answer, and where do you want me to go?
So usually we take a break around 8 o'clock,
Okay.
just for people to stretch their legs. You told me it was going to be a little less than 30
I did.
minutes, but that's fine. So very much appreciate the presentation. I think we're going to take a break now, and we'll reconvene right around 8:20. So we'll be back.
Perfect.
So we turn back to the last slide, questions. So board, it's almost 8:30. I'd like to open it up for questions or comments you've got right now. And I'll just start with, there's a lot here. So, and I'm sure that we haven't read the whole.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna
Oh,
say.
can we just take the slide down?
Slide down.
Yeah. Was there anything more in there or are you
No.
good? Okay.
Although we might want to.
It's up to you,
go
unless you
back
want to
and show you something.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll do
Well,
that if
we can pop it up if we need to. right?
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So board, questions, comments?
Didn't,
Jess, did you also have a
did you have a
question?
hand up?
I did have questions, but I'm gonna hold off.
Liz?
Sure. Rich, thank you. I just want to say thank you because this is just the type of information we needed to go forward to make our decision making. I don't have any questions right now, but I appreciate this 4-option scenario, all the financial numbers, and particularly the protection of our firefighters and the accountability that you're recommending that we require of any ambulance service. Those are very important and a really good roadmap for us going forward. So thank you.
Daniel?
Thanks. I have like 400 questions. I will try and I'll try and like only ask the ones that are really, relevant right now. There's a lot to take in. I'm sure that people in the community, well, actually, let me back up a little bit. So everyone apart from Rich and maybe Patrick, this report was hot off the press at 5 p.m. this evening. It's now 8 something. And so I doubt anyone in the community or sitting at this table has read it all. So thank you for like the overview, but I think we should also recognize that like everyone is going to need to take some time to really, read this report and digest the information. And then we'll probably come back with lots of questions. And so when we have questions that follow up from tonight, are we going to be able to communicate with you guys and receive responses, or will we need to have a further kind of engagement with you?
Call all you want.
Okay.
If you start asking us to build something,
Yeah.
then it's a different, but no, it comes with the package.
Yeah.
So we will answer all your questions. I can either reach out to the SME that wrote that section or answer them myself, but call a lot.
Great. And when you say SME, you mean subject matter expert.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right. I do have some like content questions as well. So where to start? Boy, oh boy. Let's start here. So we looked at response time. That's like a metric that people really care about, rightfully so, because when we're thinking about the worst case scenario, we want the ambulance to be there quickly. Is there a slide we can look at to be reminded of the response times that you saw, those 90th percentile times from the 3 providers, or a page in the report we can refer to?
I can do either one. Do you want
Let's
to
do
see it
both.
on the screen? I can put it back up there.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah, and is that is reflected somewhere?
Yeah, I believe so.
Just got to be.
Let's see, I'm fighting you. Go to the top left. Or go ahead and turn on the presentation. There we go.
Page 45 in the report, I think. Let's take a look.
Yeah.
That one.
Great.
That slide.
Thank you. So the data that is behind those graphs. So we have 2022 from July 1 until maybe a month ago for the Golden Cross time of 7 minutes. So when you say 90th percentile in lay people's terms, another way of saying that, and correct me if I'm wrong, is 9 times out of 10,
Yes, sir.
your response will be 7 minutes or less.
Yes, sir.
Correct. Okay. So Golden Cross and BFD, right, because they've been working together, have been able to respond in 9 times out of 10 in 7 minutes or less so far this year. Over the calendar year of 2021, rescues 90th percentile time was 11 minutes. So a little longer, but not disastrous. And that BFD response time is from 2021 when we responded, so this was like responding first to a call that rescue also responded to, correct? And so, we've got a little variation there, 6 minutes, 11 minutes, and 7 minutes. And then there's a standard that is listed in a chart for an urban area of 9 minutes. No, correct me.
And in your report, if you get to probably page 30, I'm just trying to get I'll find it here in a second. It's not.
34.
It is page 30 or 44, please.
Page 44.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting because I'd like you to speak to what's on page 34 as well then.
Okay.
Talk to me about the difference.
So when we talk about standards, keep in mind a standard sounds very legal. There are no requirements for a municipality.
Right.
They base it on whether or not you are paid or you are volunteer, whether you are urban or very rural. They try to come up with metrics that, apply to both. In this particular situation, the gold standard, the best of any system would be a 4-minute travel time and about 1:20 to get them out of the building. All right. Because obviously you got to get up, you got to put on your protective gear and you've got to get out of the building. But that standard truly is based on, not an average, based on a perspective of the country, NFPA and accreditation documents. Now, what the standard should be for you gets back to that document. I will say that most organizations your size that I've had to do with, it's somewhere between a 6 and 7 minute total response time. That is consistent with what they have resources for, and that's what they can do. So that's something. You want to talk NFPA, they're there. That's what that green line is for you. Then you want me to go to 34?
Let me just ask you a question based on what you just said. So you're saying that between a 6 and 7 minute time would be desirable. And so I see that represented in 2 places on that chart for Golden Cross and Brattleboro Fire, but rescue's time is a little longer than that. So were we to contract with rescue, would you recommend that we say we would like for you to, meet a standard of 7 minutes for the 90% of your calls?
There's the big question that you have for your folks. Now, one of the things that is the debate across the country is if you get a paramedic there within that 4, 5, 6 minute window, obviously care is initiated that you're not going to start transporting that split second, with the exception of a few of those calls, strokes, trauma, a gunshot wound. These are very rapid events. So it would be a discussion item. I have systems that on the West Coast where they have a 12-minute by the ambulance, but the fire department has to be there within 5 because they have paramedics on those engines. So you can tailor this any way you want to based on what your constituents want. In this particular case, because of your volume, because you don't have any, real risk that you have demonstrated where they're crashing fire engines and these kind of things. I think in this system, the 2 of them could be very close. You could say as a municipality, we'll give 1 more minute for transport, but I think they should be very close to one another. Now, right now, just so you know why these numbers, because Golden Cross, is coming out of the fire station. So their numbers that you see up there are from their record management system. It's a little bit antiquated and it doesn't capture seconds. So their time is probably slightly better than the 7, but I had to document what we had. But the reality is coming out of, the station or the 2 stations, they're somewhere between 6 and 7 minutes, both entities right now. Now, as far as Rescue Inc., again, that there was one discussion, and I just want to at least identify that because it's going to come up to you, is there was some thought during our interviews that there was a delay, that the fire department got the tones as much as 1.5, 2 minutes sooner because of an electronic system, not out of malice. And then finally, the private ambulance got their notification. We did a pretty thorough investigation, and the best we could come up with might have been 6 or 7 seconds. I don't think they're getting the information at the same moment. Now, your system right now, they're really getting it. They're in the same building. So that supports that they're, coming out of one dispatch. But we didn't, if it comes up, we didn't find any evidence that there was a true delay with your dispatch center getting it to all entities. Now, as far as whether that 11-minute is appropriate or not, all right, you on occasion have ALS, but you certainly don't have always a paramedic on that engine. That is what I'm talking about as standard. You folks decide based on what these people want. But the only time I ever see that there can be a prolonged amount of time to get an ambulance there, it's if you guarantee the paramedic is coming off that engine, and you don't have that. So I would say they probably need to come out at about the same point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you got more questions, but we'll
Yeah, I think
other
someone
board members.
else- yeah.
Other board members? Jess.
Sure. So, we're currently utilizing 3 ambulances.
Hmm.
And I noticed that some of the options 2 and 4 for BFD run systems only have 2 or 1 plus daytime. Can you elucidate?
Absolutely. And the brilliant gentleman in the back of the room asked the exact same question, and he's absolutely right. When you read the report, this is a 3 ambulance as far as the machine goes system. So you'll have to lease one. It doesn't have to be a particularly fancy one, but it has to meet all the minimum requirements. And it is cross-staffed. When we say it's a 2 ambulance, we're talking staffing 2 ambulances, but you have to have the 3rd. There's going to be a transmission that goes out. It needs a new starter. You'll need that 3rd unit. Some systems borrow. You go to your neighbors and say, hey, listen, we need to borrow an ambulance when ours is out of service. I don't think that's going to work around here. So the reality is there need to be 3 vehicles with the appropriate equipment, appropriately licensed through the state of Vermont, will have to be in the jurisdiction. But when we did, and we figured on that amount when we were doing your capital expenditures, but it'll be staffing 2. And that 3rd one, which by the way, there's a section in here is 2% of the time. It's not enough to validate staffing that 3rd unit. It's relatively rare, but is necessary. So you're right. It is 3 vehicles. We're focusing because staffing is the expense. It always is the expense as people. So we're talking, when we say 2, we mean 3 vehicles.
Can I,
Yeah, let's.
just to follow up on that, and
Yeah.
then Jess, I'm sure you have more questions. I just want to clarify. So options 2 and options 4, which were both like ones where the municipality would be taking over, those are both considering we have 3 ambulances that are here, but
Yes.
we're staffing. I'm trying to find the page in my report,
Absolutely.
but
3 apparatus,
3 apparatus.
2 staff.
And option 2 is staffing 1, and did I understand that correctly? And option 3 or option 4 was staffing 2, or
Not quite.
okay,
Option 2 is staffing 124 hours
Yep.
a day with a fire, paramedic, fire EMT.
Yep.
But it has a 10-hour day car that's going on at, 9 to 9. You can see that time in here, 8 to 6, whatever time you pick. The day car captures the rest of that second, and at night, the 2nd and 3rd is cross-staffed. The people get off the engine to get that 2nd and 3rd ambulance out in the
Yep.
middle of the night.
and I'm going to give it right back to Jess. My last follow up on that is just, is there somewhere in the report that considers the level of mutual aid that would be required if option 2 would be the one that we decided on?
Absolutely. And it shows where it's coming from.
Yes.
Which, by the way, you're giving it more than you get it.
Yeah.
You give it a lot, which is great. I want you to. It's just taking care of your neighbors. But there is also a part in there that talks about the burden. And we met with all of your neighboring fire chiefs. I was amazed how many showed up. It shows commitment is what it does. And they all basically stated a commitment that they would continue to support. And if they needed to help you get over the hump, they would do everything they could. So I think that your level of commitment in all directions is great here. It's a compliment to the system. I go to systems where they do not.
Yeah.
That's not yours. So yes, there would be a level. I think it would be extremely rare that you would see the change, because when you say 2%, of a third ambulance needs to go out means I've also got to have a fire at the same moment that 3 ambulances went out.
Right.
This is a pretty rare event, but you got to consider.
Okay, Jess, sorry. Back to you.
My other question was around, well, firefighters have been going out on EMS calls since 2002. So would the option 2 and 4, is that looking at hiring specific paramedic staff and EMT staff for those EMS services, or is that a combination of firefighters and EMS? Are firefighters used as backup? Like, how does the fire folks hired as firefighters, how did they work into this?
Should
EMS
you
model?
choose? That is another great question that you would answer. It is putting, option 2 is putting 2 firefighters on that ambulance, which means if they're not on an EMS call, they become firefighters on the structure fire.
Mhm.
But that 10-hour car might be what we call single role. That could be a paramedic and EMT who are not firefighters, that's their sole purpose is just to do EMS. There are many versions that you could do of this. So yes, option 2 puts at least 2 firefighters on duty on any given day, in addition to your current staffing, and you put your other firefighter back on the engine. So these are firefighters on an ambulance. Obviously, if they're on an EMS call, they can't serve as firefighters, but they have the ability to wear 2 hats. And this is most systems in this country, is to have 2 hats, because we just don't run that many fires. To have them have multiple capability is just cost effective. Option 4 is both those ambulances have firefighters. Now you're putting 4 additional firefighters a day in the system. And if they're not on an EMS call, they would be on the fire. So, but they cost more. Single role, if you have straight paramedic and EMT during the day, or even that second car, there are so many versions you could sit down, depending on your budget, and evolve into another system. And by the way, I think this will be an evolutionary process, regardless of which option you take.
Thank you.
Tim.
A lot to digest, and
Yes.
I really want to hear other people's thoughts. So I only have one question, and actually you almost got to it, both of you. But I'm still a little bit, I just want to make sure I'm very clear on the option 2 and option 4.
Okay.
So would you mind just explaining the difference between option 2 and option 4 to me again, slowly, maybe? There's something going wrong in my brain.
No,
So I'm sure other people might have this trouble, but because it's got a significant general fund impact difference.
Yeah.
I just want to fully understand the difference between option 2 and option 4. You described option 4 as third service, and I don't quite understand that.
Okay. Would you go to page, please? $41, sir.
40. Thank you.
41.
41.
No problem.
I'm going to bounce you a little bit into a couple different places, so bear with me a little bit. Figure 35 shows what is called concurrency. 86% of the time in the town of Brattleboro, there is 1 call going at a time. That is the majority of time. 86% of the time, there's only 1 EMS call. They're not overlapping with, other events. It's 1 call. And that includes fire too. We also looked at when, there could be a fire and a heart attack at the same moment, because we were starting out looking at, what's the fire department's capacity. 12% of the time, there are 2 events going off at the same time. All right, now you have 2, a chest pain over here, cardiac, and we have a stroke on the other end of town on the other side. And then finally, 3 incidents are 2% of the time, getting very low. Now, if you would scroll up, it's almost at the top of that chapter to page 28, figure 22.
Okay. Yep.
In that picture, it shows you when these calls are occurring. So obviously, even those two concurrent EMS calls are very rarely happening from, 10 o'clock at night until 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning. You can see it goes down a lot in there. That's not to say that they don't occur, but they're very rare. So what we did is we calculated, okay, we can cover over 90%. As a matter of fact, we will hit with the 12-hour car from 9 a.m. until about 7. You could put a 12-hour car and capture almost all of the EMS calls and then send them home. Okay, instead of having them sleeping in quarters and they're not running calls. So the second option, in answer to your question, would be to have a 24-hour crew that is capturing that one call 87%, I apologize my memory, but something like that, that one fire crew covering 87% of the time. Then those 2 ambulance calls are being captured by an ambulance during the day from either, let's say 9 to 7, 9 to 6. You can pick which one you want at the bottom. There's an 8, 10, and a 12-hour car. And you could say, okay, they'll capture everything but 2% of the calls, and then we send them home. So you have option 2 is one crew on 24/7, and one crew is capturing what we call peak demand in here. Then you get to the third ambulance that is always going to be covered by the on-duty crew jumping off the engine because it's so rare, you can't fiscally afford it. So all of them include that one. That is option 2, is a 24-hour car and a surge capacity car here during the day. You pick the time. It'll have an EMT and a paramedic. It might be a firefighter. It might not. It depends on how you build the system. The 24-hour car probably should be, because then you get the best of both worlds. They can still fight fire. So at least it's an option for you to consider. Option 4 is you're putting on 2 full fire, a paramedic and EMT on each one, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There is no surge capacity. So obviously that crew is going to get a little bit of rest, that second one out, and then systems start to alternate. That way you don't burn out paramedics and that kind of thing. But they would have a much quieter life if you were dividing those between 2. The third ambulance is still going to be cross-staffed with the company that comes off the engine and gets on there. So there's 2 full crews, which is probably your ultimate goal. And that puts 12 firefighters into the system. And you can cover this. Whether or not fiscally that's today, maybe not. Maybe that takes an evolutionary process. Does that differentiate between 2 and 4?
It does.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Just a follow-up. It's quite possible that option 2 would lead or build to option 4. Is that how it's laid out?
Ma'am, I think it'll be a hybrid version of several of them that could build. I'll give you an example of that. Is you could say, okay, our 24-hour crew, and I mentioned this earlier, is the fire crew, but that day crew is a private ambulance. It could be Golden Cross. It could be Rescue Inc. if they should decide. It won't be AMR, but there are many versions that you could build off of this. And yes, I think you would evolve into probably 2. And as you get bigger, who knows? Maybe you build a third station that becomes 3, but let's hope not. I like Brattleboro the way it is. But yes, ma'am, it is an evolutionary process and you could build from it. It could be you do Rescue Inc. and say for the next 3 years, we get ready to build this system. All of this is within your judgment.
Thank you.
Tim, further questions?
Not for now. No, thank you.
Can I ask a real short
Yeah, Daniel.
question? Super short clarifying question. When you say car, you mean ambulance?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sometimes we're responding to an EMS situation in a non-ambulance vehicle, correct?
Yep.
Right? And so like option 2 and option 4, which has BFD running this service, requires the purchase of ambulances, plural, right? 2 ambulances. actually, I've surpassed the clarifying and now into interrogatory.
That's
Okay, is that okay? Sorry. I might as well just keep going. And in your kind of financial kind of summary and comparison, you spoke to one of those ambulances maybe being leased or used in your kind of calculation of capital outlay. Could you tell us like more about why and sort of what expenses we're talking about for an ambulance?
There's a huge range. The top of the line ambulances are about $200,000. Okay, they're very expensive piece of equipment. Then you've got to get into, are you doing 4-wheel drive or 2-wheel drive? Are you doing the box on a truck or the box on a van? These are different types of ambulances. So it's another evolutionary process that she was discussing. You probably would talk to an entity who would say, okay, we'll give you these 3. And by the way, you're going to need 3 to have 2.
Okay.
You're going to, because one's going to break down. You might have that third call, that 2%. So I'm saying you probably have to lease or rent, but there's probably an evolution there where these are probably several steps down. There's remount ambulances that are about half of that cost, where you have a new chassis, but the box is being reused. There's many versions of this. We tried to find some spot at the beginning to say, okay, here's where you would probably lease, get some used ambulances, and then over the next 5 years, you would start to evolve to something else.
Mm-hmm.
But again, there's a whole lot of decisions that have to be made prior to that one, but you have a lot of latitude. And I believe even, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but even Rescue Inc. offered to rent you their vehicles for a period of time should you decide that that was a direction you wanted to go. Or not Rescue, Golden Cross wanted to. So I think you guys could come up with a myriad of options, and then it would be the chief's burden to go out and weigh those to see this is where we want to get. And then what does that take you 5 years down the road?
Okay, thank you.
further questions, board?
I have one more
Yeah,
question.
Liz.
Rich, can you go back to this slide that showed the options with the pros and cons?
Yes, ma'am. There's one.
Okay, so
And they're not in any particular order. I just had to pick one to put up there first.
lack of accountability and transparency. Did you find that difficult in preparation of your work?
Very much so. We were basically told that this was, what is that term?
Proprietary.
Proprietary information, and they would not give, Rescue Inc. would not give us any depth beyond what we could get in a public forum. But I think the information we have is enough for you to make a judgment.
Thank you
But
very
they
much.
are a private business.
Mhm.
Where that line crosses a little bit is when asking for public money. I'm not aware of another situation other than here, where if you're asking for a subsidy, those things have to be provided, or call it a fee for service, which is reasonable. They could simply say, this is what we charge for a fee for service, just like if you hired another independent contractor to come out, this is our fee for service, but it's not a subsidy anymore. A subsidy has to be defined. This is the gap between the cost and the revenue, and we would like the town to fill in that gap. Now that's just the position of AP Triton. We're just saying that we think you should know that from a transparency. In this case, private ambulances, and to be all fairness, we get very little cooperation from the majority, especially the big ones, the AMRs, until they want a subsidy. And then they have to provide certain piece of information, or the municipality won't give them their subsidy.
And similarly, in our prior contracts, you recommend having a set time frame,
Absolutely.
level of service, and that type of accountability is also required for whomever, public or private or town, that we work with.
Absolutely critical. As a matter of fact, it's what I would like you folks to do first, is set the stage, set the foundation, then build your system.
Thank you.
How do municipalities who contract with third-party ambulance services establish that accountability when they're using a third party? do they just request data monthly and review it and the third party provides it if they've got an agreement in a contract like the one you proposed?
It's defined in the contract. You must provide this information.
Yeah.
Now, in your case, there's some capacity because the dispatch center is yours. That does afford you some great opportunities to say, yes, here it is. I don't always get that situation, but no, you would say on a quarterly basis, maybe it's biannual, you get to decide that. Here are the benchmarks. You must meet these expectations at a 90th percentile, or, and as I understand, you're an attorney, you understand, or, and then you would establish some requirements for that. And that is very much in the agreement. Otherwise, they're in breach of contract, and we deal with that often.
Yeah. So there's lots of different terminology and data in this report, I can already tell, and also in your presentation. One that you touched on that I found really interesting, but we haven't come back to, is the total unit hour cost and how one of the big AMR private companies would go for like 120, 100 and something, 110. Do you abbreviate that to something, or do you just say total unit hour cost? But they go for like 110. Can you tell us what each of, like, should we be considering that number when we're looking at these four options, and are they calculated somewhere in the report?
Absolutely. If I understand your question correctly,
I don't know.
it's critical for your negotiation, because what happens now is an organization comes to you, and I keep picking on the poor AMRs, but we'll pick Acme Ambulance. They come to you and say, we're going to charge you $122 per unit hour. You are now armed with what it costs to run the system in Brattleboro. We did it independently. You know where that it is. And there's your negotiation now. Now you should sit down and say, no, we understand you have overhead. We will give you, we know it's at $74. Well,
I think that's
whatever that number was, 74 something for those two. We understand that there's overhead involved. We will negotiate to $94 a unit hour, or so it gives you a position of power to be able to, at least from a informed position, to know what they should be charged. If they're doing 130, they're flat out making too much profit off this community. So you need to get that number when negotiating a contract.
Yeah. And with the data that we have, are we able to calculate that with the previous contract that we had with Rescue?
No, because see, I don't know their operating costs. I don't know their revenue. I don't know. Matter of fact, I don't know anything but the payer mix. I do know what the payer mix is, but I don't know what they charged. To be very honest, today I found out, I got a hold of a 2018 document that listed their charges. That's how I was able to tell you they're close to 1,400 in 2018. So I'm sure that they're very competitive business wise, because that does prove that they're paying attention to the national average, even though I don't like that word. So no, I don't have their information, but we have their financial statements, and I know the call volume. I know the payer mix. We were able to extrapolate from that a pretty good prediction. But no, they could easily come back and say, that isn't actually 2021's. And I would say, please give it to me then. That would be great.
And is it inappropriate for a municipality to request that kind of information when negotiating a contract with a third party?
If you have a subsidy, it is almost essential.
And is the $288,000 approximately that we were paying to Rescue before a subsidy?
That's what you're calling it, is a subsidy. Without having their information, based on what we have right now, perhaps that's not a fair subsidy. But you folks have to, again, it comes down to being armed with the information. I can show you on option, well, if you look at option 4, that's a good one to look at right now. That is getting very close to break even. So their subsidy of 288 might be an accurate subsidy between the cost of doing business and the revenues that they are taking in. It also says that for that same very close amount of money, you could internalize this, but it helps validate that it may not have been an inappropriate subsidy, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The concern I have, looking at it from a financial point of view, is they've had the same somewhere between 25 and I think 26, and please don't hold me to which those numbers, per capita for a very long time. I got a chart that shows that same amount of money dating back. I'd have to look at the chart, but it's like 20 years. They've kept that very flat. Unfortunately, what that translates to is it has nothing to do with the cost of that should vary depending on the cost of providing service. And I know that service has gotten more expensive over the past 20 years. But as of today, from my perspective, I think the 288 is not completely unreasonable. It might very well be an accurate number. Ask me maybe that was the wrong number 5-10 years ago. I would question that a lot, but today I think that's a reasonable number.
Okay, yeah. Other questions, board? Before I turn it over to public?
Nope.
All right, let's drop the slides so that we can see the big hands. So I'll start with, I think I last time did the Zoom, so I'll start in the room. We got questions? Yep.
Dick DeGray, actually, got most of my questions answered at the break.
Good.
Might be good for the public to
You
hear.
want to share
But-
what those were?
In option one, I have a question. If we go and put this out to bid, I'm guessing possibly Rescue and Golden Cross might bid on this contract. Do you know of anybody else in the area that might bid on our contract if we chose option one?
I think that those are probably the most likely of the two bids.
Now, if we go back to you choose option one, where does that leave the fire department? Do we go back to that old model in terms of them responding along with the contractor we hired? Did you talk about any of that in the report?
May I answer this?
Yeah, I think, do you have additional questions? Do you want to follow up with that and then we can sort of answer them all?
The response time kind of got me when you compared Rescue and Brat Fire. And I'm going, Rescue is at least 3 minutes from downtown where the fire station is. So that's going to add, I don't look at that as I didn't look at that as a negative, their response time, just because of their location. And it's never been an issue before this report came out. No one's ever gone, oh, what's the response time? We've got to do something else or relocate Rescue. So if you could answer the question about the combination of fire, or we eliminate fire from doing any rescue calls at all.
Yeah, do you feel comfortable?
Absolutely. You will always have the fire department doing first response. None of these options take that away, and so that'll always continue. And the level of care that they provide is what could vary, whether or not you have paramedics on those engines or whether you have EMTs, but you will always have first response. It's almost essential for two reasons. One of them is during periods where there's transport, you have to know that somebody's showing up at that door in the next 6 minutes and to initiate care. So none of these options change anything about. The change would be putting that firefighter that is currently staffing Golden Cross, putting them back on the engine. I would like that just for safety purposes, but they will always provide first response. The decision you folks have to add is if you were to say, okay, the 11-minute is acceptable, then you really do have to place emphasis on a higher level of care on that engine, because that's too long to wait for a paramedic. Now, if those things have paramedics on them, then yes, there's a conversation, and different municipalities choose different options. So that's the first question is fire will always be responding as they always have. There won't be any change. And it's absolutely necessary. We get called and it's usually a mystery. And one of the benefits of having a fire and ambulance response is if you get there and need 6 people to get them down 3 stories of the building, you have them. If it turns out to be a cardiac arrest and you need to do CPR and all the other activity, it takes more personnel. If you don't need them, they just stayed in service. They could still go to the second call, the fire. That's why you always want them on that engine. I've had people that's like, I broke my ankle and a fire engine showed up. I get this. It is necessary because I don't want them to drive 3 minutes to get back to get that engine to then drive to your house that is on fire. It keeps it autonomous. And in this system, it works very, very well. Does that address your question, sir, about you'll always have fire response? Second question.
Second question was just about the response times.
Response time.
Yes.
And this is very valid. I think that the 11-minute by Rescue Inc. does not support a conclusion. Under the way the system was built, I think they had success. I just want it written down as to what exactly is the performance expectation. But I do think if they are going to say, we're going to give you an 11-minute response, that's what we'll put in the contract, then I think you need to consider about, what's the level of service you're going to provide on that engine.
But there would need to be a paramedic on every one of those
pretty
because
much.
you need to make sure,
If you're going to get to the gold standard, now you could say that's not what we're going to do, but I think you're going to want to provide that level of care. But no, the 11-minute does not support a conclusion. It was just the information we have. The one thing I do want to repeat one more time is we did not find any evidence to show that there was a delay handing it off to any other entity at the same moment that the fire department was getting it. I don't think that is, we didn't find any evidence for that.
Excellent. All right, so we're going to move on to a hand in the public, and I see Bob Ozer.
Okay, I don't know if you can see me.
Yeah, we can see you and we can hear you.
Okay, Bob Ozer, Brattleboro, and I just have one question. I wanted to drill into something, and thank you, Mr. Buchanan. On the estimate or the estimation of revenues in the chart on page 97, I'm wondering what your level of confidence is to come up with those numbers. And the reason why I ask that is that we have been having EMS updates every month. And so we now have about 6 months of data. And in that 6 months of data, the revenue was about half, a little bit more than half of what was estimated here, if you extrapolated for the year. So I'm wondering what your level of confidence and how you came up with that number. And maybe how much data you used to come up with it. And
great.
That's my only question.
Thank you very much, Bob. It's a great question.
Excellent. An answer to your question, sir, is you're absolutely correct. They're less than half, actually, of what we're proposing, but they're also billing at $560 for their call. So, and we propose that they should be billing somewhere around $1,400 per call to capture that commercial insurance. So yes, they are exactly. Now it's an apple to an apple as far as Medicare, Medicaid, well, not Medicare completely, but certainly Medicaid, and the veterans amount, which was actually higher in this community than I expected too. But that being said, that's because we are proposing to go to a more national level of $1,400. And currently Golden Cross is just a little over the $400 or $500. Rescue Inc., to the best of my ability, is already there. Based on what the information I found today, I think they're very close to that $1,400 right now. And so I believe their collections are very consistent with what we are predicting. Again, I would have liked to have had those financial statements. We were not given access to them, so I can't say what happened 2021 and back. I just have financial statements from 2020, but it covered all of their business. So it wasn't useful.
And Daniel's got a follow-up question.
Bob, thank you for your question. It's a very important one. Rich, in the payer mix charts, you kind of break down that 77% of folks in the Brattleboro area either have Medicare or Medicaid, right? Mm-hmm. Those people are, we could bill them, $8 million for the ambulance ride, but those insurances will pay, you said, I think $534. That's just what we're going to get. And so let me make sure I understand. So currently, if you were to get an ambulance from Golden Cross, come to your place, they're going to send you a bill. And I think you said they're going to charge somewhere around the 500 mark currently from Golden Cross, right? Which is what's happening today if you call for an ambulance. Previously, if you had an ambulance from rescue show up and you are not Medicare or Medicaid, you would receive a bill based on the data that you received of approximately $1,400.
Somewhere in
correct? And so the third way is the municipality provides the service. And I mean, I hear what you're saying. You're advising that we bill somewhere around the $1,500 for one of these calls, but it would be a policy decision of the select board and informed by, you know, our staff as to what cost is attached to an ambulance call. Am I
No.
being correct here?
No, sir. The
Okay.
decision from the board would be, what would be your collections policy?
Okay.
You're saying.
We'd still bill $1,500, right?
And that's where the subscription programs work very well. And there's many others than just that one where the municipality said, okay, I've got one municipality in Texas that you're responsible for $250 beyond what the insurance pays. After that, we're even.
Okay. And so the subscription policy that Rescue Inc. Currently has, were you able to gain any information about that?
I have a little bit.
Okay. Could you share it?
So basically, under the subscription program that they have, they bill an annual amount. And then if the ambulance comes to see you, they're still billing the insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, commercial. But if you have the subscription program, you're not responsible for anything else.
Okay. So the subscription program is almost like a policy to not chase you for the rest of the thing, but you have to pay a certain amount for that policy. Got it.
That's the philosophy that you folks as an organization get to set and say, what is going to be our collections policy would probably be. And you guys decide.
Okay.
And so, and Golden Cross does not have a collection policy where they chase after people for the.
I can't speak to that. I don't know what their collection policy is, but I thought part of the agreement is they weren't going to collections, but I don't know what that agreement is.
And arguably, if they're only charging the amount that Medicare and Medicaid are going to reimburse, they're probably not having a huge gap because they're not losing from the, private insurers where there would potentially be, well, I guess maybe not either.
Golden Cross currently, they write off the rest that they don't get. They don't send what they don't get to the patient. They write it off.
Okay.
Follow up.
Yeah.
You have a lot of national experience and dealing with a lot of, what the picture is nationally, better than we do. How common is it for an ambulance service to not, as you say, try to capture the more private insurance by billing at $1,500? Is that common?
As far as I know, it's Brattleboro. It is very rare. Is that a better statement? I guess. Public forum.
Yeah, you do.
It is very rare that they're not trying, because like I said, you're not benefiting your constituents with this. It's your philosophy that you benefit your constituents with is your collection policy. But as far as the other, no, it's very rare. I can't tell you a national statistic is they say that to regulate your billing, if your collection rate gets above 33%, you're not billing enough. You need to raise your rates. It tells you that you're just getting your $522 and you're letting commercial insurance, get a really good deal for this. And so we use that 33% as a kind of a benchmark. There's nothing written in stone, but if your collection rate is 80%, which my feeling is that Golden Cross has a very good collection rate, they probably need to raise that up. I believe Rescue Inc., and this is very subjective based on what little I have, they're probably right where they need to be.
I just want to make a comment. Say that I find that disturbing on a national level. Like, it kind of points to a real problem with insurance.
Yeah, I guess we can get into that.
But I think somebody like should just say that, because I think everybody on this board probably agrees with me that
Well,
kind of
no,
messed up.
I agree.
actually,
but-
I feel the reverse. I feel Golden Cross should step
No,
up.
no, I agree with that, but
Mm.
I'm saying the system wise
Yeah.
is kind of messed up. Not going to affect.
Oh,
our
I'll tell you
decision.
about my allergy tests and,
Well, we've all have those stories.
Yeah.
So.
And sir, and what we hang our hat on, and this is a very important statement, is you should set your billing rate on the cost of doing business. That's what's missing here is whether it's $1,400, we didn't get that because it was the national average. We got that because we calculated your cost of doing business first. Now we're trying to minimize that gap. So that's where this should start. I wish the country would go to being testimonial. I wish it would be back to, you go get surgery and it's the cost of doing business and you're going to get a bill. And that's not always the case, the extraordinary multi-dollars for a Tylenol kind of thing. Well, that's because they're balancing all that out.
Sure. Jess.
Also, there's the consideration that this is a service like fire protection, like policing, like the library that we provide to our residents. So to me, it doesn't necessarily have to make the business sense and balance itself out. But what I wanted to ask was billing wise. So I don't know anything about this, and I just the idea that you have to bill everybody the same, that makes sense. Is it allowed for you to put your billing policy on those bills so that folks understand your collections
Absolutely.
policy? And
Absolutely, especially in a municipality. And
Yeah.
if a private ambulance picks you up, you may be surprised as to how they're obviously staying within their legal boundaries and they have the right to take you to collections if you don't pay for your services that they rendered. But a municipality would definitely say, this is what we're going to do. These are your options to avoid it. That would be the subscription programs. That would be the supplemental tax programs that I see. Texas is fond of them. Those kind of programs. But yes, it should be very transparent.
lovely.
Other board questions before we're back to the public? Oh, okay, we're back to the room. Yes, figured.
Hi, Kate O'Connor, Brattleboro. And I just have a clarifying question based on that conversation we just had. The chart on page 97.
Yeah.
Is that the revenues based on billing at $1,400 a call? So the 309,000 that we'd have to put in from the general fund is based on us billing the maximum, right? So if we billed lower, would be more than 300,000 we'd have to put in from the general fund.
Yes,
Am I
ma'am.
making sense? Okay.
100%.
Okay. Thanks.
And billing the maximum is basically like not talking about a collection policy where, because this is assuming we do not go after.
Precisely.
Yeah, we only are billing the insurance company, Medicare, Medicaid, the government. And if there's any kind of gap, that we're not going after that at all.
Precisely, which is a philosophy.
Which is philosophy. Daniel.
I want to kind of just check that. So the revenue that was estimated in these options 2 and 4, right? Because options 1 and 3 don't have any revenue for the town. Is $935,626. If we're saying we sort of do about 1,800 transports a year.
Yeah, it's very close. Sir.
Right? So like 935, 626 divided by 1,800, let's call it that. That kind of comes out to about $520 per transport. So when Kate's saying we're billing 1,400, what we're not expecting to collect 1,400 from every single transport that we do. So that 935 is derived from what we expect to collect.
Total.
Not what we
yes, sir.
will bill.
And there are some where we will get nothing.
Yes.
Someone has no insurance. And we have no.
And there are some where we'll get 1,400 or closer to that.
Close to that. And then there are some where we'll get 500.
And there's 77% of them where we expect to get $534.
Mark, 50.
I think it's 50.
Mm-mm.
I'm sorry.
We're arguing over.
Now we're arguing.
Medicare.
Medicare was
What's the
50,
Medicare share?
You
Medicaid
are
was
50%
27.
Medicare, yes.
Right.
Is that what your question?
And that amount is
But you're-
500 and
About
You're
530 here.
But you're adding Medicaid.
Yes, didn't you say Medicaid?
Is
Paid at the
they're
same rate?
in the same family.
Okay.
Now, if you folks go to
Different rates.
page, and we're very careful about this, 94,
94.
from a business perspective,
Ah.
that's where we're suggesting if you should choose to go down these paths. There are other sources of revenue. That shows what we believe the subscription should generate in this town. It shows what a treat and no transport, basically, especially motor vehicle accidents. These are not your constituents. You folks are providing services and they're not paying into the system. The insurance companies are very good about paying that amount. It's a small amount, but you should capture it. That shows what we really want you to make in your system. We were just very conservative, but it still does not include a collection policy. You know, we're going to send you to collections. We want $200. That's all about you folks. But there, we're just pointing out, I leave it off because if we stay at the very bottom, then again, it looks better in the end.
Okay, other questions to the board? Back to the public? Okay, I see, this one David, okay.
Hi, David Lovemark, District 3. I think Daniel already foreshadowed this, but I'm going to ask if you would schedule this matter for as an agenda item for a future meeting, and also ask if Mr. Buchanan or somebody else from Triton can be available, if only by Zoom, to answer questions. It's a very dense report and a lot to digest.
I'll take that one. Oh, and we're getting echo now. We're still getting,
I think if you mute David, you'll be.
Yeah.
if you mute David, maybe
Okay.
I do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I will take that question. Absolutely. Well, I can speak at least to the first part, which is we're definitely putting this on for another agenda, probably multiple agendas in the coming months. And it's just going to really come down to the agenda setting committee in consideration with the lots of other things that are coming up in January and sort of what's going to work. But we'll make sure that there's plenty of public notice. As for availability for AP Triton, absolutely. Okay, so the answer is yes and yes for sure. And also agree, it's a very dense report. So I imagine that people are going to review it and read it and have lots of additional questions that we'll want answered, myself included. So I'll look to the board. I'm going to wait and see if there's anybody else that has a question who hasn't. And all y'all in the back who I can barely see, if you have a question, you're going to have to raise your hand up so I can see.
Oh, yeah.
I can't see any. All right. Yep.
Dale talked about billing. Now, I believe that we do have a policy for billing and providing service to non-residents. Do we ever use that policy if we go up on 91 and there's an accident? And are we billing? And at what rate are we billing?
So in that case, if you want to just step away from the mic and let Chief come up, speak so we can make sure Zoom can hear.
Dick is correct. We do have an ordinance that we can bill motor vehicle accidents for where if the people are charged with a DUI or some sort of that we can charge the insurance company. We do that. Some we don't, it doesn't happen a lot, but we do get some revenue from that.
Great.
Recently.
And my follow-up question would be, that's 91. Do we do it in Brattleboro proper anytime that there's an accident and they're a non-resident?
Is that
are we billing
shake?
for-
Yes.
Yeah, that's similar.
Sorry. I got scolded at the beginning of the meeting to make sure people come to the microphone. So
The ordinance isn't specific to I-91. It's specific to Brattleboro.
okay. Thank you. All right. So I don't see any other hands on Zoom right now. And I look to the room again. So I don't see any. So board, I think additional questions, comments, I've got one or two more. And then I think we need to have a conversation about kind of next steps and what we want to be thinking about for the future. Yeah, Liz.
Rich, I know you mentioned a discussion about the fire department itself and firefighting service. Where would we find that in the report?
There's about 60 pages of it. The first half of that report is an evaluation of your fire department as per the scope of work. I go through their training. We went through their staffing. We went through their capital. We went through, it was a very strong report card. I can tell you that you have an excellent fire department, and we still have, 10 pages of recommendations because you can always get better. But yeah, the first half of that report just looks at the organization and what areas we think they might be able to improve and infrastructure and those kind of things.
Thank you.
Liz, other board members? My only other question for it, we have there's a lot to take in, and it's also a very big discussion and a big decision for this board and this community. One of the questions I have from your experience with other municipalities across the country is, are the subsidies that are offered in option 2 and option 4 both within the realm of reasonableness for what would be considered, fair for the size of our community and the number of calls and the type of calls that we get and the type of insurance that covers those calls?
It's a great question, and it doesn't have anything to do with fair.
Yeah.
It gets back to what does it cost to provide services in that area?
Yeah.
So there isn't a standard that says, we have 40,000 people, therefore the subsidy should be this much. Keep in mind, it 100% depends on where you are, because some entities, there's 2-hour transports every time they put somebody in an ambulance. And there's some entities that are taking place in Vail, Colorado. These are expensive because, it costs so much to live there. So in answer to your question, I can't answer that question.
Okay.
What I want to do is focus on the cost of doing business, then what you can receive. Then each municipality is very different because those vary a lot. Your payer mix alone would dictate that this is a unique environment compared to if you did Austin, Texas.
Which actually gets to my second question, which was, is there another community in the US that you've worked for who is similar in any way to Brattleboro? And if there is, what system do they use?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We've done many systems just like this that has to make this hard decision. This is not uncommon.
Yeah.
And so I can provide this town manager with a list of people they can call, and they can lament a little bit together about, we went through that. Here's what we did to make our decision. So yes, I can provide you some of those that are very close to this. The thing that is unique about Brattleboro is your isolation.
Yeah.
That is a little bit because you really, you're not up against Austin, Texas, where, in 10 minutes you have the entire city fire department coming to you. So all of these factors are involved. But yes, I can give you people that have similar challenges as what you have right now.
That'd be very helpful.
And they made a decision. And quite frankly, they make a lot of different decisions.
Yeah.
There isn't the square fits the round hole. On occasion, the private works very well. On other occasions, incorporated into your, fire department and the benefits of that. It varies. But really it comes down to your constituents. What is the level of service they want?
And Daniel, did you have?
No, it's fine.
Jess?
Yeah, just a question on your sheet here of page 97. Option 1 is listed as costing $288,240. That's the number on our contract that was in 2021 that we had with Rescue. That doesn't reflect the unit service hours that you calculated.
Mm,
No, that's,
no.
that is a number that represents a relationship that had different transparency, that didn't have any set standards. And that's where that comes from.
Mhm. One of the very interesting things that we found, and this is to the credit of Rescue Inc., is that I don't have anything that supports that dollar amount. But when we were trying to build a system, all of a sudden it gets reasonably close to that amount on the far right. So no, I don't know where they originally came from it, but I believe when that, as we understand, that was the dollar amount that they were requesting prior to the separation. What it would be in a year, 2 years, that could change a lot. I don't know what that is, but I think that as a whole, it turned out it was a reasonable number compared to you folks doing this on your own.
But moving forward into the future,
But I
that
don't-
may not be
Yes,
the
I don't know
actual
what that'll
number
be.
that way.
Yeah, I need to see the operations. I need to see, I'm sounding like a broken record.
And I think, oh, I'm sorry, you go ahead.
So I understand what Jessica is saying here. We're saying that, this was a number we were asked to pay, but we weren't really informed as to why that number, and you weren't informed either.
No.
Okay.
We weren't provided any.
And I guess the only two other questions for me, unless Liz, you had your hand up. Sorry.
I sort of had one sort of.
Okay, Tim first.
Oh,
and Liz, I'm not sure who had their hand up.
Well, I was just going to say that we know where, we don't know where rescue's revenues are in option one. We do know where this 935,626 come, because that's 1776 times 530. So what Rich is saying is we don't know where the revenue numbers came from, nor would we. But the interesting thing that he said was that we've been paying this $288,000 for like the past 10 years. So that all has to come into our decision making.
Tim?
So mine is sort of I always think, when approaching a big decision, I always think to myself, how quickly do I have to make this decision? Because we have a lot to digest. And I wanted to acknowledge what you imparted upon us, that we want to make sure we decide what our response times should be. What else was there? Get contractual with things. There was one other thing that I'm leaving out. So there were a couple of urgent things that you're encouraging us to take care of in this report. When I look at the 4 options, and as you said, it can be more than 4. It could be 3B. It could be 4 plus part of 2. What I see here is that it's setting aside the fact that right now is the most expensive. It's none of this is like urgent that must be decided immediately, in your opinion, because when I'm looking at these numbers, I don't like the fact that the highest, impact on taxpayers is the current option. But my highest priority is maintaining level of service, making sure everything is running correctly. You say that it's going very well, and that reassures me. Is there anything that I'm leaving out as far as like speed in which we should be making this decision? You see what I'm getting at?
The town manager can correct me, but I believe you have at least a 1-year contract currently. So that means you obviously have until June, which affords you a fair amount of time to make a lot of decisions. I don't think there is, I'm going to recommend a town for you to talk to who were given literally a couple of weeks. And so it was crisis management.
Well, we know that feeling too.
Yes, you folks have time to make the right decision. So I think you can. The only urgency in this entire process is I have concerns about having pulled those firefighters off those engines. They're now on ambulance. That is a real concern to us because you were already a little bit short. Now you're really short, but they've pulled it off. Like you said, it's working. I just let's not do it any longer than you have to. But I think that this decision process will probably take you till June.
And I know Patrick well enough to know that he wants to say something.
How did you know that?
I can just tell.
So I think what Rich has said is right. I know the firefighters are working really hard right now. I know we have a contract in place with Golden Cross until June 30th. But the one point that I would like to offer at this moment is if we choose, for example, either of the two fire EMS options, those are going to take time to implement. And implementation is got a whole lot of different, very complicated variables. We've got some negotiations to have. We've got some equipment to acquire. There could be delays in equipment acquisition. It will take time to staff up. So, when we make a decision, let's go this way and not that way, we need to be prepared for a lengthy implementation process.
Absolutely.
Board members? I have one I'm going to take before you. I think the only thing I wanted to clarify when comparing the rescue cost to option 4 and the closeness of those two numbers, the one thing that isn't similar is that you with option 4 you're building a system to service Brattleboro, and rescue does not just service Brattleboro.
Right.
Rescue is an operation that services all of District 13. So to say that they're similar and that the costs are similar and so the subsidy is similar, that would make sense to me if rescue, when they were charging us this amount, was just servicing Brattleboro, because then we could say, oh well, okay, they need this many staff, they need this many ambulances, but the reality is that they have a much larger organization. They're doing a lot more things, which is why understanding what the overhead is and what the difference is and what potential subsidy they need is. I'm kind of making a statement. I'm just looking to you to ensure that I'm understanding your point well. That's why that transparency is critical for us when we're negotiating a contract, because we don't know.
Absolutely. Now, philosophically, you guys carry a big burden because you are part of a bigger system.
Yeah.
And, I understand that you have to consider other communities as well. I get that part. And I don't know that this 288,000 is very focused on Brattleboro. I don't know that. I just know that that's what you paid. It just happened to line up rather nicely to actually staffing 2 ambulances 24/7. So that means that there's probably some validity to that number, but you're right. I don't have anything factual to back up where that came from.
And all of the service providers that you spoke with and gathered data from in preparation with this report had an opportunity to review the data that they gave you and was put in this report before it became public.
Absolutely.
And that was offered to rescue as well.
Well, they didn't give us any, so there wasn't anything to substantiate or to confirm. We got the public documents, but particularly to your point, one of the concerns I wanted to make sure is we used a great deal of data from Golden Cross, and then we let them have it to say, no, you missed that one. And they validated that, yes, okay. They didn't agree entirely, which is refreshing. I mean, they didn't 100% agree with our analysis, but the information they gave us, they said, yes, you documented that correctly.
But rescue was made aware that they would have that option should they provide
absolutely
data. Okay. Daniel?
I just want to double check. So we asked for information from Brattleboro Fire Department, which you got. You asked for information from Golden Cross, which you got. You asked for the same information from Rescue Inc.
Yes, sir.
And you got that?
I did not.
You did not get that. You got something?
I can send you, and I think it's a public document.
Is it in this?
It is not.
Okay.
I received an email back that listed our questions and why they could not respond, proprietary information. And so they did address to say that, we're going to elect not to. Now, what they did offer, we already had because it's public domain. Their 2020 taxes and that kind of thing.
And so what they did share with you, were they comfortable with sharing that with the community?
I
Do we
think it's
know that?
public domain. I think they have shared what they gave us to their, their
Huh.
reports, their awards, these kind of things, I think is on their website in public domain. What we needed was very detailed information. I needed at least 1 year of incident data. I needed financial statements specific to, 2021 and, not including other adventures because they have other activities they're involved in,
Understood. Yeah,
immunizations and training and different things. So I did not have that information. So, but I think we were able to, it worked out well. I think you have the information necessary to make a judgment.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, yes.
Rich, one more question about mostly option 3. The salary and benefits of option 3 are increased firefighter salaries and EMS?
No, ma'am. And for clarification, option 3 is what you're doing today.
Right.
Where those 2 firefighters have been placed on the private ambulance because, they have shortages too. So there's one Golden Cross individual and one Brattleboro firefighter that is on that ambulance. So we have to show that that money goes to that area because they're no longer on your fire truck.
Right.
So that's 462,000 is because I moved them out of the fire suppression and put them on Golden Cross's ambulance.
Great. And so then option 2 and option 4 is more the same.
Yes, and at the very bottom, you can see in option 2, it would add 10 firefighters to the system. Option 4 is 12.
Great. So that when we're talking about the costs of what's happening now, option 3, it's the third-party contract plus firefighting personnel being reassigned.
Correct. And like I said, I think at the time it was a very necessary event and they were successful and they were able to, because the individual from Golden Cross had assets, but not staffing. Brattleboro Fire was able to accommodate that. And you've done great for, what are we up to, 8 months now or 7 months? But
no, I'm just trying to understand the numbers. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Other board questions, comments?
I just wanted to say that brings up what I had forgotten to say before was that the other urgent thing you asked us to consider soon is the number of staffing level overall for fire.
yes,
correct?
I want that to be a concern for you folks.
Yeah.
Not a
I just wanted to
crisis.
acknowledge that that's
Just
what
a concern.
just a concern.
Yep.
Okay.
And that was true before June of 2022 as well, that we're below the 17, but no community gets to 17. So we're trying to get up to 12.
You weren't even close to 17.
Yeah.
I just wanted you to get to 12. And the problem with that is, like most communities, including all of your neighbors, you're all dependent on each other.
Yeah.
They're having more troubles getting those resources here when they're the ones, quite frankly, you're providing much more to them. And that is in the report too. It shows you who you're providing it to and what percentage. It just makes it harder on another municipality. They want to help you just as bad as you want to help them, but there comes a point where you should grow into eventually some autonomy.
Daniel?
Every question reveals another question. So when you say 12, what you mean 12 firefighters working on shift that are able to respond to different emergencies concurrently? Or because we have a platoon of what, 7? 7 working at any one time, right? So help me out here.
I know what you're exactly saying. What we believe is that, and like I said, NFPA is a guideline. Currently your 7 is too low. All right. In most cases that is not the safe response we want. If you got it closer to 10 or 12, then you depend on your neighbors to come in to get you more towards 14, 15, these kind of things. Right now, even when your neighbors arrive, you're sitting at 8, 10 people, depending on the time of day. You can also have, resources come from everywhere if they happen to be available at that moment. We would like a little more autonomy for the town of Brattleboro, that you're not as dependent. But you're always going to have to work well with your neighbors. That's just the way, and they really need you.
So I guess, I mean, what we've heard from, a fairly large number of people in the community is go back to rescue. But what you would say, if we did say, let's go back to rescue, you would say, go back to rescue and staff up the fire department more.
At least a
Right.
couple of people.
So it's
yes.
288,000 plus whatever it costs to staff up, at least a couple of people
It's-
per shift. So
And sir, keep in mind, we were tasked with evaluating the fire department
Yeah.
also. So that's why it wasn't.
no,
that
I
was trying
appreciate
to- I was not trying to
No,
mix
it's very
this.
helpful. Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
are absolutely correct,
Yeah.
is that we would like you to set a goal at
Yeah.
some point, which would be part of those benchmarks. Because in that benchmarks, it defines how many people you're going to have within your system at a given moment. And then after you define that, then you can say over the next 5 years, we'd like to get to this number. We would like you, based on our analysis, to get you to 12.
Yeah.
That's what we would like to see you do as you grow. Skipping EMS to the side, we just recognize that there may be an opportunity there, but we'd like you to get to 12 over the next few years for the simple fact that that'll, give you the capacity to not be as dependent.
So, Liz, yeah.
Well, just, Daniel's question prompted, the need to reiterate that we need accountability from whatever private contractor we would have, both financially and in terms of service that we don't presently have.
So, I think what I'm hearing from the whole presentation and from this conversation is kind of our next step should really be looking at the goals of what the system achieves and what this community wants as far as response time, and if response time is more, who's on the ambulance and those kind of questions. And so for the select board, really our next meeting should be sort of when we're looking at this again, should be focused kind of at least initially at that discussion. Because when you start from the goals and objectives, then the system follows to accomplish that, those goals.
You're absolutely right. And if you took that document that I put in the appendix, that gives you the framework to start saying not only staffing, but apparatus, it has it all in there.
Yeah.
And that is your foundation. But I want to emphasize, it does not hold you obligated, because I have, city attorneys usually, or town attorneys want to be like, wait a minute, if we put this in writing, now do we, it does not. It just simply means that's your benchmarks.
Yeah.
That's what you're trying to grow to.
And I think it's a really good thing for this community to reflect on, is what, what our goals are and what our expectations are for our emergency services. So I think, Board, in that case, that would be sort of what I'm feeling like the next step is we set a meeting as soon as, is reasonable for both the agenda and also for getting questions both from the board and from the public. And then as they review this lengthy report to AP Triton and to appropriate entities to get answers. So I don't want to do this too quickly. I want to give people time to review it.
Absolutely.
But that's kind of what I'm thinking. Is that, and so maybe something in, maybe in January. If
After
not,
the budget.
hopefully after the budget, or Tim's
We're
shaking.
not gonna make January.
You gotta make January?
No, I don't think we can manage it in January.
Okay,
I think to be prudent, we should say February.
okay.
I mean, because what's our deadline for getting things out?
27th of
Yeah.
January?
So we have to agree on the warning for representative town meeting on the 31st.
Okay.
Which means we need to have the budget wrapped up hopefully the week prior. And we've got a mess of decisions to tackle in the 3rd, the 10th, and the 17th.
And did we
gonna
mention
be
a new
fun.
town manager?
Yeah.
There's also,
And
Yeah.
3 seats up for election on this board.
Oh,
All right, well, I guess I don't want to,
Don't worry about
I don't
that.
necessarily want to commit to a certain time now, then. Why don't we look, but I just think like if that's kind of makes sense to us, that's kind of the drive of the next meeting is looking at those goals and those objectives. And we try to get community feedback on that in the interim and hear from the community at the next meeting. I think that could be a really successful start.
Bob
Okay.
Bosier's hand's still up.
Oh, Bob, yeah,
So I wasn't really going to say this, Bob Ozer, District 3. I wasn't going to say this, but there got to be some back and forth discussion about the decision-making process and about some of the partners or contractors and what was said and what wasn't said. So I would make this comment that there was, I believe, an expectation on the part of some people that a draft of this report would come out earlier than today, like last month, and that some of those parties who might have issues with something that's in the report could then come back and respond to it. And so that's maybe a missing element here. And I think that just should be underlined.
So thank you, Bob, for that. Do you mind speaking to that briefly?
If I understood, the comment is when the report was delivered?
Yeah, well, I think that, so what I was speaking to before was basically the technical draft, I think was the terminology, was made available. So it was not the final, it was something made available to the providers who gave data to ensure that AP Triton hadn't calculated things incorrectly, so giving those people, those agencies an opportunity to address any issues that they had with how the data was analyzed or presented. Is that accurate?
It is. The technical review isn't for public or review. That is just the factual basis within the report. We said 3 fire engines, there's only 2, 5 buildings, there's only 4. When we make mistakes, that is what the technical review is. And it went on for a week or so while we developed that. Just for our own edification, we met all the terms of the contract. Just so we weren't late. Now, one of the things was we could have easily delayed this entire process and, handed the report today, and then I show up in January. This was a possibility. The benefit of today is sometimes I can navigate this document. I have a pretty good idea of some of the major questions, address those before people try to digest this document. So usually this technique works very well in the sense that now you have a framework, you have the presentation, it makes it easier to go through it. So this is actually a pretty normal process right now. In answer to that gentleman's comment, now it is time to really digest, and then I would be more than happy to, in a month, in 2 months, then we sit here and I virtually would answer all your questions after people go through it. Sure. But the process is, some people we wanted to see the technical review. I don't want that to be in the public because we've made mistakes. They have to be fixed before we do that. And then the conclusions are added and that kind of stuff. So the process is actually pretty clean in the way it was presented.
Yeah. Okay. All right, board, any other? Yeah, all right, Dick.
So the follow-up on that is that
I'm moving on to Dick, Bob.
Dick DeGray, given your discussion about meeting later in January, there's financial implications here that would impact the budget. Because really the budget is an open-ended document until it gets to town meeting. You're just warning the budget. You're not warning a number. That's something to think about. Or would we say, okay, we're going to do a contract extension with Golden Cross, and then we get into this full-fledged, whether it's option 1. Option 1 is not. I mean, if we go to option 1, then you got to, I don't think there's $288,000 in the budget for this year, correct? No. So there would have to be, if you decide, you probably could do that at town meeting, adjust that. Or any of the other options. Or you say, okay, we've made this decision. It looks like next year we'll go into this after the budget process, because we'll have the money in.
Yeah.
Is that going to be part of, you're kind of in a pickle here.
Yeah, I know.
With the 30th of January with your budget and trying to make a decision that has financial implications for us.
I was thinking exactly the same thing. So I think there need to be consideration that we have it in January before the end of the budget conversation. I know that makes.
No, I'm good. Yeah.
What's that?
I thought you were gonna go the other way with that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay, there may not be agreement. We don't. I think that there's a potential that we could make a decision that has budget implications, and why would we not want to try to make that before we put the budget out?
You know,
What are the implications?
Yeah.
you want to have a discussion about level of service. I mean, it's not something, I don't want you to rush to make this decision.
No.
And so if it takes you until March to make the decision because you've really vetted out everything, then so be it.
Yeah.
For us to try to make a quick decision by the end of January, I don't think that's going to serve us well unless you're ready to have multiple meetings here, correct?
Yeah, I hear you. Do you want to speak to it? Or
I guess I'm just like, you said that what you warn is, help me out here. When we warn the budget,
No, you
we warn
warn the article.
right? We're not warning.
So what are the lines in the budget that we're concerned about? Like in fiscal 24?
Ambulance service.
Yeah.
So we've put in a number for, I'm sorry if I didn't catch the obvious. We put in a number, or what we believe to be a reasonable number for an extension of a contract with Golden Cross. Is that what we're concerned about?
What I thought I heard Dick say is, hey guys, you've got to get the warning done by the end of January. So does that mean you need to get all this settled by the end of January? And he would like us to take our time, right?
I think we should take our time, and I don't think we're not going to get this settled by the end of January.
Because you're talking about purchasing ambulances, and Patrick earlier in the meeting said there might be delays in getting some of the stuff that we need to provide the level of service that we're looking to provide. And so trying to rush something, which is not going to change, in option 1, 2, 3, 4, level of service is A+. Okay. There's no drop off, but there is a financial impact with 2 and 3.
Yeah.
And so we need to make sure we take our time and say, okay, this is what we think is the most. After you're gonna have a discussion, you're gonna take input from everybody in Brattleboro, and then you're gonna go and you're probably gonna bring Triton back and say, these are some of the questions that we got in our couple of meetings. And say to them, this is our level of service plan. And then you'll make your decisions. And so at that point, I don't think you're going to get it done in January. And I don't think you should rush to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, this has been going on for 6 months, and another 6 months isn't going to hurt us because nothing's going to change in terms of level of service. We can continue the contract. So be prudent and do your due diligence.
I appreciate it. And yes, absolutely, Dick. Yeah. Liz.
The current budget includes Golden Cross Ambulance Service as it is now.
Yeah.
Steady state.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Rich cautioned us to do was whatever we choose, it's going to evolve. And that evolution is the time that we need to make that decision.
Other board members? No? Well, I think with that, I just am incredibly grateful, Rich, for your time. Thank you. And,
Thank you.
And your team.
Andrew. Yeah.
Yes, and the full team. And I think we'll just look to speak with you as questions come, and we'll be in contact with your team. And then the next time that we have a public discussion about this, we'd really like you to participate via Zoom so that you can answer questions from the public.
I'll be 100% available.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, can we clap?
I've never gotten flat.
We do that sometimes.
We're friendly.
All right.
Oh, hey, I'm sorry to interrupt. Jessica, there's a little dongle in the USB port on the on the computer
Yeah.
and it belongs to Rich.
Rich? Oh.
And I know Rich is heading out. I just want to make sure he doesn't leave without his.
And,
And can we
Does
get
he
copies
know?
of, are we getting copies of the presentation?
Yeah,
I would assume.
I've got the presentation.
Yeah.
I can
I'd like to
circulate
see
that
that.
along with the digital of the report. And
All right.
tell Rich that.
Well, we
have some
cleared the
business to
room.
do, But it might not be.
Nobody wants to wait to see if they get
I think
nominated.
he was heading out for the
Oh, okay.
night.
So, board, we're gonna move on to new business.
I wanted to get him his thing.
Good.
Everything all right? All right, new business agenda item 9C, which is Charter Revision Commission or Review Commission, depending on who you ask.
Read the charter.
You know, the,
Inconsistent.
It's inconsistent, that's what it is. Okay, so just a little recap. This is the once every 15 years, the Brattleboro, the town of Brattleboro, per the charter, appoints a commission to review the charter and to suggest changes, if any, to then be voted on by town meeting, if they so choose. I guess they could do other options as we've learned. In preparation for this 15-year review, the select board and town manager's office put out requests for letters of interest. We got back 21.
21 minus
I thought it
1.
was 20, but
I think we had
you know,
21 and then we had one drop, but
we had 2 drop.
we had 2 drop. Okay, so we got back approximately 20 applicants, serious applicants who were interested in being on the commission. Then over 2 separate special board meetings, the select board conducted interviews of all the applicants, which were really very beneficial. And I think the board learned quite a bit from each of the applicants doing that. We're now in the process where we will finally appoint the 7-person board or commission using the kind of clunky, antiquated process that the select board does for things like this. But I was just having a conversation earlier with one of my other board members and realizing that I don't really have an idea of what would be a better version of how to do this and how we do it. So, you know, I'll complain, but I also am not, I don't have something alternative to offer. So I'm just
Maybe
going,
the charter study commission rule.
well, that would be, we actually get to change our rules, select board rules. So, so I'm just going to pull this up. Here it is. Okay. So, this is one. Okay. So, this is select board rules, procedure for appointing citizens to town boards to fill vacancies F6. Upon conclusion of interviews, the select board at a scheduled select board meeting shall consider all candidates who have submitted letters of intent by open nomination. Each select board member may nominate more than one candidate, but only after each member has had the opportunity to make a nomination. The chair of the select board shall put the question on each candidate to the select board in the order that the candidate was nominated, one candidate at a time. The select board shall vote in public with their individual votes announced by voice, and we can raise our hands. Individual votes shall be recorded by the secretary in the minutes. The chair of the select board continues this procedure until the required number of board members is elected. In the event that there is a tie between candidates, this procedure is repeated between the tied candidates until the candidate with the most votes is appointed. I read it out because it's kind of, I think we always kind of are questioning whether we're doing it right. So I feel pretty confident in doing this time. So board, I'm going to open nominations. We're going to go around and appoint, starting with Liz. If you skip, if we get done and no one's appointing anybody anymore, we're going to end appointing the appointment phase. We'll move into the voting phase. Once we move into the voting phase, I don't think we can go back and appoint people. So once we're done, make sure you appoint the candidates that you want to make sure are voted on. And then we'll go through the voting. And I've asked Patrick to very diligently write down the names of the appointed in the order. And then we will go through the vote per the rule in the order that they're appointed. And then Patrick's going to record for me who votes for each one until we get the slate of 7. Very exciting.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you, Patrick. God, I love procedure.
Mm.
All right. So board members, Liz, starting with you.
David Gardenstein.
Liz has nominated David Gardenstein. Tim.
Denise Glover.
Tim has nominated Denise Glover. Ian. I'm going to nominate Kate O'Connor.
Daniel. Oh, that's me. I nominate Maya Hasagawa.
Jess.
I nominate Hannah Clarice.
Jess is nominated Hannah Clarice. Liz.
Peter Elwell.
Elwell.
Hmm.
Tim.
Andy Davis.
Andy Davis. Ian. I'll nominate Oscar Heller.
Nominate Farmise.
I'll nominate Joy Chorneau.
Liz.
I'll nominate Ernie Coughlin.
Tim.
I will nominate Franz Reichsman.
Ron. Daniel.
I'd like to nominate.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm done.
Ian.
I'm done.
I'd like to nominate Millicent Cooley.
I'm done.
Just done. Liz. Done.
I'm done.
Tim. Done. Daniel.
Let me check.
Do you want me to read out who's been nominated?
No, I got to
Okay.
I'm done.
I will.
It's kind of nice, isn't it?
It's really nice. You're done?
Yep.
Okay, so now we're going to, I'm just going to read off of it with you.
Yep.
So we're going to go down through the list and we'll do one at a time. So board, you can vote as many times as you want for each
You can
time.
vote for as many
You can
candidates.
vote- Thank you. That's the thing before. It's been a long night already. So we're going to start with David Gardenstein. Board members, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hey, keep your hands held just for
Yeah.
a second, if you wouldn't mind.
Cinque. No.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
Doesn't help that you're in the
Oh,
middle.
that's how you're doing it. Okay.
Here, I can do it. I'll have to do it for you.
Sure.
I'll just use this really nice form. You made.
Yeah.
So Denise Glover. 5. Kate O'Connor. 5. Maya Hasagawa. 5.
Oh my God.
Hannah Clarice. That's gonna be 5. Wow.
Oh, we'll be here all night.
Peter Elwell. It's gonna be 5.
Whoa. You're 6.
Did Chris Mays vote too?
Yeah.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Andy Davis. It's gonna be 2. That was 8 is Oscar Heller. It's gonna be 2 for Daniel and I. 9 Farmise. It's gonna be 2. Just 10 Joy Tourneau. That's gonna be 3.
Oh,
4.
4. Thank you. 11 is Ernie Coughlin. 1. Oh, sorry. 3. Shit. Oh.
Chris, mate, did you get that?
First time it might be the first.
Yeah, I think it is.
Wow.
Interesting that it came here.
Yeah. So that's Tim. I should have had you do this.
I can do it. I mean, I'm.
No. Tim, Daniel, and Jessica. Liz, did you vote for Ernie as well?
I didn't.
I did.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Jessica didn't.
Okay.
Can we,
We've got 2 more. So I gotta finish. 12, Franz Reichsman. 2. And 13, Millicent Cooley. 2. Okay. So now is an interesting thing. We go back, so we go down through and we determine everyone who has basically been elected because they got all 5 of our votes, and so they're on. So if there's more than 7 that got 5, then I think we'd have to vote through those 7 or more than 7 until we got. Yeah. So right now, David Gardenstein, Denise Glover, Kate O'Connor, Maya Hasagawa, Hannah Clarice, and Peter Elwell got 5 votes. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 1 left that has not been appointed. So of the remaining candidates, there were, I think
There's only one person.
I think there's just one. So Joy Turneau received 4 votes, I believe, which were Jessica, Daniel, myself, and Tim. Is that accurate? I think.
Is there anyone else with 4?
No, and I can just go through and make sure that we all agree. Andy received 2 with Tim and Jess. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Oscar received 2 with Ian and Daniel. Barr received 2 with Daniel and Jess. Joy received 4 with Tim, Ian, Daniel, and Jess. Please stop me if I get anything wrong. Ernie received 3 with Liz, Tim, and Daniel. Franz received 2 with Tim and Ian. And Millicent received 2 with Daniel and Jess.
Okay.
So that would mean that Joy got 4 votes, which was the most out of the remaining 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 applicants, which would mean that she is the 7th.
Can I just make a point about that before you declare that?
Okay.
I was under the impression that, this might not follow our rules.
Okay.
But now that we have a pool of leftover candidates who didn't get 5, should a revote occur? Because that changes the opinions of each of us as to who is possible to vote for. You see what I'm saying?
The rules are pretty clear.
But the rules say that it should be based on number of votes. I thought the rules implied that you revote when it's not conclusive.
So I'm just going to go to the rule.
Okay.
Okay. And I read the rule. So we
No, I
all
know,
knew
but
the
I mean,
rule.
It's a
So,
lot of words.
okay. So we made nominations. The chair of the select board shall put the question on each candidate to the select board in the order the candidate was nominated. 1 candidate at a time. The select board shall vote in public with their individual votes announced by voice, and their individual votes shall be recorded by the secretary. The chair of the select board continues this procedure until the required number of board members is elected. In the event that there is a tie between candidates, this procedure is repeated between the tied candidates until the candidate with the most votes is appointed. So my reading of that would be the first 6 candidates were elected because they got all 5 of our votes. And then if there had been more, then you would have had a tie between all of them, right? So let's say all 5 of us liked 9 of them. Those would all be tied to be appointed. So we would need to vote between those 9 until we got 7. So we didn't have that though. We had 6 that got all 5 of our votes, which then we go down and the next number of votes would be 4. And so if we had multiple people who got 4 votes, those would be ties. And then we would take a vote between those candidates.
But there's only one.
But there's only one person who received 4 votes, which is Joy.
Looks like we're done.
No.
Okay.
I want to make sure that you feel comfortable with how we're doing that, because I don't want to question about the validity of this.
No, I wouldn't question the validity. I think when you made the statement as you can vote for as many as you want. Right. You know,
Was being generous.
People might have been more liberal with their votes. Is that your opinion?
right. I guess I don't.
Maybe they already were, you know?
Am I, do you think I've done any of this incorrectly?
So I read it the same way that you do, and this is your rules.
We have 6 people that are ironclad on the
my
committee,
interpretation
and
is
then
the
one
same.
person that got 1 fewer votes.
Yeah, I guess my question is why would we not? And we're going to take the time to talk about this until we feel comfortable with it, because if we need to do it differently, we can. But Dick. No, I'd love to hear if you think I've done any of this incorrect.
Sitting where you sit and going through this process, you followed the process that we followed, and several times we had multiple ties, and with people keep raising their hands until somebody got tired and said, okay, then it was a 5-4 vote. But you were correct. You got 6 people with 5 votes and you're looking for 7 people. And I would agree that if there were 2 people with 4, everybody would vote again until somebody said, okay, I'm
Yeah.
tired of this nonsense, time to go home.
Yeah.
So I think you did it the way that I, as chair, did it on multiple occasions, so I don't see any reason why you would rehash what you just did. I think you did it to the letter.
Okay, thank you very much, Dick. I think, Tim, does that sort of
Yeah.
satisfy the question?
It's my own fault. I think I voted for somebody and I should have withheld that vote because that would have changed the calculus of who just got in. So I was being overly generous with you can vote for as many times as you want, not realizing that it would come down to only one person that would get through after the 6 that were nominated unanimously. That's all.
You, in voting, you should vote for the people you want to see elected. And no more.
Good advice. Good
Right?
advice.
I'm just saying that the calculus changes when the rest of the body shifts the possibilities. You see what I'm saying? That's why I was advocating for, well, shouldn't it be that if we have 6 slam dunks, that last one should get revoked so that we all know.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So those people that we all gave, that we were unanimous on, was there somebody there that you were like, you voted for that you now wish you hadn't? And I'm not saying name that person.
No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's that 7th person that I wish I had another chance to vote because now I didn't realize that.
I understand.
But
that was
what if
calling-
we
they're all
what if we
good
voted
people.
again?
They're all
on the
good
remaining candidates. I wonder what the outcome would be.
Well, it doesn't matter now
I know.
because we have followed the process to a T. And
Yep.
I apologize, Tim, but it's we read the rule. I think it was pretty clear. I think. Yeah,
That's fine.
yeah. I'm sorry that I wish that I had been more clear so that.
No,
understood that.
you were perfectly clear.
But I do think that that's something that we can consider for when we're rewriting the rules next year. That while maybe this process is fine, maybe we could make it clearer how the process works for what we do.
Right, like a sort of in the event that you do not fill the committee, the highest ranked next person, there's better language than that, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What happened here?
What happened?
That's fine.
I'm personally very excited that Joy Torno is going to be part of this commission. She's a new resident and
You
she
would join 3
brings.
other board members in being excited.
Yeah, absolutely. She brings a natural curiosity and I'm very excited.
I don't think it's about any one candidate.
Yeah, I was
Just trying to ensure that everyone understood the process and then we followed it correctly. And I believe that we have, and I am excited for this commission. I think that it's very exciting and they're going to do a real service for the town.
Cool.
excellent.
So do we actually need a final vote on that, or is that actually?
Got the rules.
I mean, didn't we just do it?
No,
Did we
we're,
do it? Is that?
I
We're
believe
done.
you accomplished your.
Yeah.
Okay, so in that case, the final Charter Review Commission is going to be David Gardstein, Denise Glover, Kate O'Connor, Maya Hasagawa, Hannah Clarice, Peter Elwell, and Joy Turno. I want to thank the people who we've appointed. I also want to thank all of the other people who came out and applied. 21 applicants is a really phenomenal turnout for a 7-person commission. And I think that the community appreciated how important this was, and it was a hard choice. I really look forward to watching the commission do their work. And I commit now as one member of the select board that the town will ensure that we provide the proper staffing and material that they need so that they can do their work well. And, I wish them all the best.
And I encourage everyone who didn't make it onto the final 7 to apply yourself and jump onto another committee or board or run for elected office.
Also to attend these meetings and make your voice heard as a member of the public, because these are all public meetings. And by these meetings, I mean the charter review
I mean, don't come to these meetings.
No, don't.
No,
come.
We got enough people.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
I mean, look at this.
Okay. With that, Jess?
Would you like a motion?
Yeah,
I move to adjourn.
Jess has made a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Carries 5-0. Thank you very much to BCTV. Thank you so much to our interpreters who are gone. And thank you to
I'll do this, we'll do the
Patrick and Jessica for running the meeting.